I've seen a mum go down her pants, into her private parts, take the thing out, pass it to her son, and her son then take it and swallow it. I went to prison, so I want to come and get my stuff, and my picture was in the gate. Corrupt officer, don't let him in. I was broken at this point. I was broken emotionally. I was unemployed with 2 young kids. They had absolutely broke me. He said, I wish we could say names. We had the worst of the worst, and lifers. Like, it wasn't an easy jail to be in. He would cut himself like on his arm, and then he would push a spoon underneath the skin to keep the wound open, and then he would let the blood out into a container. We're trying to fight this guy, and he's not even fighting, and he's ragging the biggest guys around like they're nothing, throwing 2 people on one arm against a wall, and before you know it, the prison service just becomes a revolving door of violence. It was a pool ball, lobbed across, watch this, straight across, hit somebody in the head, and before you know it, 2 gangs are just going hell for leather on the wing. And then what happens is you send screws down there, and that's going to calm it down. A load of screws running into a big riot. Suddenly you've got 2 gangs that all want to fight the screws. What keeps prisons running safe is the prisoners. If the prisoners want to take over, they're taking over.
Right, so we've got Paul with us today, and he has his own YouTube channel. We're going to get to that. The link is in the description box. He's also got an item of clothing on here, but he's an ex-prison officer. So we're talking extremely hard-hitting stories, graphic content, warning. And a lot of our prison officers, it goes back decades, but this is more recent. And prison culture has changed over the years. So you're going to get a more recent version of what's happening in the prisons. Now, before we go into his life story as to how he became an officer and take you through it chronologically, he's just going to give you a little example of a story from his time in prison where there were pool balls getting weaponized and stuff. And thank you for coming on, Paul.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. Thank you. I was shocked when I got the message saying this guy wants to talk to you, and I was like, that's it's crazy. But I wanted to tell these stories.
Shout out to Ricky Colleen.
Yeah, it was Ricky. Yeah, it was when he messaged me. Yeah. So yeah, thank you very much, Ricky. So yeah, I guess the story that I'll start off with is one of violence in the prison service, and I don't think a lot of people realise quite how violent it can be between prisoners towards prison officers. The level of violence is something I don't think even I was ready for. And not long. And
you're ex-military, so you were used to violence.
Yeah, I guess. Yes, it's a different kind of violence. It's a different level. I've been out fighting like in my 20s nearly every night in Germany as a soldier, but this is different. The level of violence and the feeling and the adrenaline that you get, it's almost addictive. And I'm sure as we get into the stories, you'll see that feeling's almost addictive. And I hadn't been in the service long when a new wing had opened, a big wing. They'd started building these huge wings, 200 plus prisoners. The smaller wings, I think, had 90 on. Now, I'm trying to recall some stuff, so I can't remember exact numbers, but it was around that. There were big wings. And I was working in the segregation unit at the time. So that's a prison within a prison.
That's like lockdown for the American viewers.
Yeah. So it's 23 hours behind your door, 2 doors to get into the unit. So it was a pretty secure place. And the alarm bells would go off. So when you're in a prison, the alarm bell goes off, everybody comes running. Everybody heads to where that alarm bell is going off because you just never know what's going to happen. And a lot of the time you get halfway there and they'll stand you down. But the alarm bell goes off, staff assistants on K-Wing. And we went belting down there. And the seg wasn't that far from K-Wing, so it wasn't a huge run, but you had to go on an outside corridor. And when we got there, I was met with something that I had never seen or been involved in my life, and it was a wing full of prisoners, and not every single one, but not just one or two fighting, 15, 20 prisoners absolutely raging. I mean, they called it a concerted indiscipline. It wasn't a riot, but it was as close as I ever come to being involved in a riot.
Do you know the backstory as to how the prisoners kicked off?
So the wing was new, and it had been opened and set up, and it was a kind of a pilot for this size wing, and there was always tensions on wings. No matter where you went, there was always tensions, but this was a new big wing, and it was a drug treatment wing. So that's where the methadone and the Subutex was given out to prisoners. And I think there was a lot of newer officers on there. It was run by newly promoted senior officers. So there wasn't a great deal of discipline on there. And what happens is on the drug treatment wings, people think that you say drug treatment wings, they're down there, all these addicts, these poor addicts that were going to try and detox. That's not what the prison service was like. Some of them were. I'm not saying everyone that was trying to detox, but a lot of it was going in, getting their substances, cheeking them, so hiding it in their cheeks. Cotton wool, we've seen this one, cotton wool in their throat, so when they drink the methadone, it soaks it up, and then they regurgitate, squeeze it out, and then they sell that. So it was a lot of tensions between different gangs, different people dealing drugs, and it had just come to a huge head. And we ran onto that wing, and I wasn't very often frightened in the prison service. You didn't have time to be frightened, but I remember thinking, this is a bad situation here.
So when you say it's come to a head, what do you mean?
So they're essentially, what would have happened is somebody hasn't paid for their Subutex, and someone's gone into the cell, and because the wings are so big, you'll have different little factions on the wing. So you'll have, and it does come down to race. You know, you do have like your black gangs, your white gangs, your Nottingham gangs, your Birmingham gangs. You might have two Birmingham gangs. I think the Birmingham gangs are the Burger Bar Boys and the Johnsons at the time. You might have two different aspects on one wing. And again, I can't recall exactly what gangs it was, but it would have been down to the fact that somebody owed someone had gone in and either, I don't think it was a pot in, I think it was a pool ball, lobbed across, watch this, straight across, hit somebody in the head. And before you know it, two gangs are just going hell for leather on the wing. And then what happens is you send screws down there, and that's going to calm it down. A load of screws running into a big riot. Suddenly you've got two gangs that all want to fight the screws. And I remember being on spur 2 of the wing, and one of my colleagues was there, and this guy had got a pool cue and was ready to go. And he had pulled my colleague had pulled his baton out. So there were extendable batons, racked it out, and they were stood toe to toe. And I remember a con, I can't remember his name, a con come out his cell and shouted at the other con that had got the pool cue, and he put the pool cue down. And as quickly as it kicks off, it dies down. And then suddenly there's just a flood of screws because we've come from quite close and we've been quick. But then before you know it, 3, 4, 10, suddenly the wing's full and everybody just scatters. But yeah, pool balls getting thrown about, pool cues being brandished. You've always got to be aware that there's boiling water that could be about. So people up on the landings, throwing stuff down. Yeah, it was a scary time. I think that was the closest I've come to it being a riot, because you can go either way. It could have gone, all them screws have come on, that one person with a pool cue swings a screw, and before you know it, you've lost the wing. Because for as many screws as you can get down there, you've got 200 prisoners. You know, that's not what keeps prisons running safe is the prisoners. If the prisoners want to take over, they're taking over.
When you were in the middle of that mayhem, did your military career give you mental discipline?
Yeah, I think that's essential. When I first joined the prison service, a lot of ex-army, a lot of ex-uniform service, ex-RAF, because you do have that discipline. And it's not just the discipline to, like the self-discipline to go on there. It's about looking smart, presenting yourself, knowing how to deal with the situation, how to stay calm. You've got to stay calm. You can't panic, even if you're like this underneath.
So
like
pool balls are flying, people are beating each other up. Your adrenaline's going to spike, isn't it? Your heart rate's going to pick up. Is it your military discipline that just keeps you calm, or do you have to like struggle a little bit? And
I think depending on the situation, it can be a struggle. It can be hard to stay calm. It can be hard not to panic. Your heart is beating out of your chest. You're 50p, 20p, and you're like, do you know what I mean? You're absolutely petrified. But I'll tell you a story about an officer who was ex-RAF. We used to call him unflappable. Nothing could flap him. He was the calmest guy. Like nothing could flap him. And we was on F wing, and a con walked up to the office. So the office was in between two spurs. So there was no. It was like a not the mic. Sorry. So it was a fish bowl. They used to call it the fish bowl because it's just a glass office. And this con just walked up to it, opened the office doors. The screw sat there and just chucks a pot of excrement over him. So it would have been saved up. It would have been excrement from 3 or 4 different people saved up in a pot all over him. The smell, and this screw just sat there, looked at him, got up and said, "Behind your door." Like, didn't react, didn't fly him, behind your door. And he went behind his door and he went, "I'm going to go get changed." And he just, as calm as anything, just went up, binned all his clothes. Everyone had clean uniform. Everyone kept fresh uniform because you never knew when you was going to get blood or excrement or anything, you know. So yeah, just unflappable, just up, get changed.
Do you know what possessed the prisoner to do that potting?
So it would have been, I don't know the full story, but it would have been, again, this screw has done something that's pissed off, that's annoyed, that con, or it wouldn't have been that con, it would have been another one. It would have been he's done a drugs test on someone and found them guilty, so then they then pay the poorer cons, the ones that are in drug debt, the ones that are in gambling debt, will wipe your debt clean if you go pot this screw. And actually, now I'm talking about it, it was the wrong screw they potted. They didn't mean to pot him, they meant to pot another one. Yeah, I remember now. He got the wrong one. And then he ended up down in the block. We was down in the block at the time, and this con ended up down in the block.
Right, viewers, so I think you can see where we're going from here. Let's just get a bit of backstory, Paul. Where were you born?
Lincoln.
Lincoln, that's on the East Coast.
It is on the East Coast.
And as a kid, did you aspire to be a soldier or any of this stuff?
No. I grew up in the 80s, in a working class family, in a farming village. I didn't aspire to be anything. I just aspired to get through life one day at a time. So I think what happened was, I'll keep it brief for joining the army, but I left school. I went to work with my cousin who was a window fitter. I got an apprenticeship as a joiner, went to college, lost my temper with a tutor at college.
Over what?
Sharpening a chisel. Randomly, he told me I was sharpening it wrong. My parents had just split up at the time. It was the week my parents split up. I was just turned 17, and he started having a go at me because I was sharpening. You're the one that's blunting in all these effing chisels. So I remember slamming it down, walking out the college in Lincoln, and opposite the college was the Army Careers Office. And I walked in and said, "I want to join the army." And I was 17 years old, and I did, and that was it.
What was your idea about the army before you joined?
Do you know what? I knew one person that was in the army at the time, and he was a paratrooper, and he had left rugby and never come back. And I think at the time it was going to be a career. I wanted to be a mechanic. That's what I wanted to do. I liked engines. I'd worked on motorbikes since I was a young lad. My old man was a pretty good mechanic, and that's what I wanted to do. And people had said, it's a good career. You'll be a mechanic.
Did it enter your mind that you might be in areas of the world where people are killing and getting killed?
Never. You never think about that. Never. It was more of a career. You don't even think that you'll ever go to war. Or I didn't. Certainly, I think people probably would if they joined now. I think it's a different world now to what it was in the 90s.
So you join the army. You're a bit idealistic. What happens next?
Great career in the army.
Training, how was that?
Yeah, great. It's mine. It's psychological, and that's what they're trying to push people out that aren't going to be able to make it psychologically. And it's borderline bullying, and I don't think they can do training like they used to now.
Describe what they made you do.
So I guess there was times when you would have to clear. I'm trying to think of the right words. Clean your rooms. So your barracks, you're in a barracks in basic training. There's 6 or 7 in your room. There's going to be room inspection. It's got to be immaculate. It's got to be perfect. Can't be anything out of place. And I remember a specific day where they'd come in and open my locker, took out a shaving foam, took the lid off it. I don't know if this is a common knowledge or not, but when you use your shaving foam, put the lid back on, a little bit still comes out the nozzle, and it'd come out and it'd spread slightly. And so open your mouth, stick your tongue out, shaving foam, mouthful, shut your mouth, stand still, and then they'll trash your entire locker. I remember cleaning your boots. Are your boots bald? Yeah, right. Let me have a look at them. They're not good enough. Straight out the window. You spent 4 or 5 hours doing that out the window. They just want to break you mentally. One of the biggest things was what it was called change parade, where you'd have to have a room inspection, have to be immaculate. Line up out front, so you're on parade. They go check the rooms. Rooms are great. Now you need to go get changed. You're in your DPM. You're in your combats. Go put on your best kit. Best kit, right? Really nice. You got 30 seconds. Go in. Come back out dressed up as a mutant turtle. So you DOS bag over your head, and okay, brilliant. Go back in. Get back in this kit, and change 4 or 5 times in the matter of 10 minutes, and then they go room inspection 10 minutes. And you go in and there's clothes everywhere, and you're fretting and you're running around, and it's that mental. I'm going to say torture. It's not torture, but it's that all the time, high pressure. You know that if you mess up, you're marching around the square for 4 hours.
Did you see people break down?
All the time. I broke down. I broke down.
What got you?
Speaking to family. I remember talking to my dad on the phone one night, and was at Winchester, and I can remember where the phone was. It's clear as day, standing, and I sobbed, and I said, I can't do this, Dad. I can't do it. It's too hard. And he was like, well, if you can't do it, come home. And I was like, no, I can't. I want it that bad. But I've seen so many people break in basic training. I think they say 7% of people that go through basic training at the time went on to do trade training because it was just so hard.
Trade training?
Trade training,
What's
yeah.
that?
That's where, so basic training is where you learn your basic soldiering. Where you learn your craft and your marching and all the basic stuff. Trade training is where you go and learn what it is you're going to do. So I was going to be a tank crewman. So you go, the first thing you learn is to drive a tank. So I went.
How much fun is that?
Awesome. Awesome. I passed my driving test in 2 days. So I'd never driven a car in my life. Down in Bournemouth, they put you through intensive training. 2 days, driving test passed.
How do you drive a tank?
So they're huge, like very carefully.
So you're inside and it's like, describe it.
I don't want to come off, but you're sat and you've got just 2 pedals in front of you. So it's like an automatic car. You've got an accelerator and a brake, and then you've got 2 levers. And if you want to go left, you pull it left. Yeah. If you want to go right, you pull it right.
Yeah.
And that's just a track vehicle.
Does it feel powerful because it's a tank?
Oh God, yeah, man. Honestly, and when you're in the like a full tank. So when you're in training, they don't have a turret on. They're just the hull of a tank with like a box that the top guy. But when you've got a full tank and you're driving it around somewhere like Salisbury Plain, and it's 72 ton, and you're doing 50 kilometers an hour, 80 kilometers an hour, 50 mile an hour, them things are. And I miss that. I miss that today. I miss it today.
What about firing a tank?
I mean, I was the best tank gunner in the British Army officially. So when we went over to Challenger 2, it was Challenger 1 that I trained on. When we went over to Challenger 2, I become a tank gunner and a gunner mech. So you did all the mechanical work on the guns. And we went on to ranges, and I was the first person in a Challenger 2, although this is disputed. So if Rod, you're watching, you're wrong and I'm right. There was 2 crews. And I was the first gunner to score a level 6 distinction on the ranges, hit every target straight through the middle. Wow. It is, oh man, that feeling. I had 3 rounds. At one point, I had 3 rounds in the air at the same time, 3 HESH rounds. So HESH rounds are big concrete rounds that you lob up in the air, and they can go 3 kilometers, and they go up and they come down, and the idea is they hit an area target. And we managed to get 3 of them all in the air at the same time with, you fire it, load it, fire it, load it, fire it.
It's because the tank is so heavy then, when you fire, there's not a recoil or a vibration. Is it quite steady?
There is a video on YouTube from the firing days of my regiment. When you fire, the gun recoils right back. You see it, and it's a huge, great big clat. And oh man,
do you feel it in the tank though?
Yeah. It's immense, and there's the smell of cordite as well. It's just like, honestly, it's immense. Anyone who's watching who's been in a tank when it's fired will know what I'm talking about. And there was you smell it, and I don't want to get too graphic, but you smell it coming out of your body days later because you inhale so much of it.
Wow.
And it was called a cordite fart, and you would stink out rooms. But yeah, it was immense. I loved that time. I loved it.
So that was your training.
Yep.
Where'd you go next?
So straight out. So I
What year is it as well?
So I did my recruitment selection on my 18th birthday, which was October the 12th, 1998. I was through my training. I finished August 99, and by September 1999, I was based in Germany. So straight out to Germany. I had a month off, straight out to Germany to my regiment. I'd grown up in a little farming village. I'd never been away from my parents, and suddenly I'm living in Germany on my own, and I'm 19. And I would have only been 18 because it was September 99, so hadn't even turned 19.
Earlier you said in Germany you were fighting every night. Was that amongst yourselves?
It depended. So let's break it down like this. So you would go to clubs, and I'm not going to say it was every night, but it was regular. You would be out on the town. We was out most nights, and this is well documented. I won't say I had a drinking problem, but we drank all the time. And at one point you could get through 3 litres of vodka in a weekend on your own. And you would finish work at lunchtime on a Friday, straight into the squadron bar. And some weekends, you wouldn't go back to your barracks until the Monday morning. You would be out 24 hours for 3 days. And you would go shopping, buy new clothes while you was out, get changed. I've slept in nightclub toilets for a couple of hours and then got up and carried on partying. And that was regular. That was a regular occurrence. So you would go out and you might go to a Turkish bar. There was a lot of Turkish in Osnabrück where I was based. You'd go to a Turkish bar and look for Turkish to fight. And if you couldn't get a fight with them, you would go to a German bar and fight with some Germans. If you couldn't get a fight with them, you'd go to a squaddy bar and fight with the Duke of Wellington regiment. And if you couldn't get a fight with them, then you'd just fight among yourselves.
And what about the beautiful German women to calm you down?
So I was married to a German first time round. I don't want to talk about that too much because I'm married to a beautiful lady now. But my first wife was German. So yeah, it was.
I had an ex-girlfriend out of Leipzig.
Oh.
Hello, Kathy.
But yeah, it was good times. It was amazing, and that was where my whole persona was born. I was still only a late teenager, and I was being molded by these guys who had been in the army for probably 10, 15 years. Yeah.
So this is stealing you then to like an action-packed environment, is it?
Yeah. I mean, you had to have your wits about you all the time in the army because bullying. I know we're not necessarily here to talk about the army, but bullying's rife in the army.
Did anyone try anything with you?
Oh yeah. I was assaulted more times in the army than I was in the prison service.
Well, how'd you handle that?
You just go about your business because you can't say anything. You can't say or do anything. I've got some really good friends who I was in the army with, who I'm still really good friends with now. And this is the difference between the army and the prison service. I went out a couple of months ago with guys I haven't seen for 20 years, and it was like I'd never been away from them. I still talk to most of them regular. They come and watch my podcasts and interact. And these are guys that I haven't seen for 20, 25 years. But there was elements of... We would call it bullying now. You would call it bullying now, but it was character building. That's what they called it. You know, I remember someone booting my door in. I was living in Germany. They booted my door in the middle of the night, and they didn't even used to ask for a cigarette. They would just go, "Fag me," and that was the command to give them a fag. And
so these are like senior officers.
These are lance corporals and corporals. So the two junior ranks, junior officers. And if you didn't, you just got filled in. I remember I got beaten up with a pace stick once. So a pace stick is a stick that the drill people use to mark out their paces. And this guy kicked my door in, asked for a fag. I told him I didn't smoke, and he just battered me. And luckily I was under my covers, so it wasn't too bad. But yeah, he battered me with it.
Wow. How long were you in Germany for?
Got there in 99, left in, I think, 2003.
Where to next?
Catterick for a year.
What's that?
Yeah, Catterick's North Yorkshire. Yeah. Straight up the A1, and it's literally just off the A1 before Scotch Corner.
So was that more relaxed than Germany?
This is what ruined the army for me. We moved back to the UK, and it went from being out every night with the boys, eating together, drinking together, sharing rooms, to Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. Everyone I was in the army with was from Stoke, Birmingham, Mansfield, Lincolnshire. You're an hour away at Catterick. People were going home at nights. People weren't even, he'd get there in the morning, go home at night. People weren't even spending time on the barracks. And it destroyed it for me. And then they talked about re-rolling. So going from being a main battle tank regiment on Challenger 2s to a reconnaissance regiment on little CVRT tanks. So it just ruined it.
Didn't you end up in Bosnia or anywhere like that?
So when I was in Germany, so 2001, I did a tour of duty in Bosnia, 6 months. Yeah, that was an experience.
So you arrive in Bosnia. What was the first day like?
Well, it's really strange because you fly in. I can't even remember the airport. I think we flew into Sarajevo, but I can't remember because you're hyped all the time and you're getting somewhere, and because you've got to look immaculate. You've got to behave immaculate. You can't be seen to be doing anything out of turn. You're too busy concentrating on how you've got to be to really recognize your whole environment. But I remember that camp. I mean, we're living in what we call Corimex. So the buildings you're sleeping in are just metal boxes with a bed, and the toilets are just prefab toilets. It's not nice. It's not a nice place. But yeah, it was. I mean, I can't even remember what I felt.
What was your duty there?
Mainly weapons searches. So you would go out on patrols to different houses from different people who had been in different militias, or whether someone had been involved with different armies, and you just search the houses for weapons. And
Any hairy moments?
Loads.
Give us a couple. Give us a couple.
I remember going to the house of I think he was a general. I can't remember. I think it was a general in one of the militias, and we had to search that, and they were there. A lot of the time, the people that were involved weren't there, but these guys were there. So we're searching there.
What do they look like?
Normal people. They just like normal people, and this is what, when I come on to talking more about the prison, people are just people. Everybody has. Not everybody, that was going to be a wrong statement. People have 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, eyes. No, do you know what I mean? People are people, and they're just normal people, but they just looked Bosnian. But they were big guys. They were big guys. They were the sort of people that you would expect to play the villain in a terrorist movie. Do you know, like, I don't want to get into race, but like dark beards and angry looking, and we've got to search the house for weapons, and we found some. We found a load of AK-47s in there.
So you enter that house, and what do you do? Do you have a conversation with them?
It's interpreters. It's all through interpreters. And the trouble is, you don't know whether you trust in the interpreters, because it is the stereotypical thing of, you ask a question, the interpreter goes, blah, 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 blah. And then there's like a 2-minute back, blah, 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 blah. They said no. They've just said about 50 words now. What else did they say? So you don't know whether you really trust the interpreters for what they're saying.
So you're searching these guys' house, and are they just sat taking that? There's nothing they can do about it, really.
Nothing they can do about it, because we're all armed, and they know at this point in Bosnia, I'm going to say it's quiet, but the war's over. It's almost peacekeeping, but it's still, there's still, I think they said, over 1 million landmines unexploded. We're still finding AK-47s every day. We're finding mortars every day. I think when I was there, one of the patrols found a tank in someone's garden, like an old tank. It was just insane. And when I think back now, I think it just doesn't seem real at all.
So when you're taking these weapons, then there's no resistance to that. You guys just walk out with them.
Yeah, we just walked out. There was no resistance. There was one time when there was. So what they were talking about was the Bosnian army. They were trying to get them to relocate all their weapons to one central depot. There was like 10 depots, and they wanted to put them all into one central depot. And there was one faction that was refusing to. So they had said, okay, we're going to go live in a tank, fully loaded, point it over there. If by midday they haven't complied, then it's live engagement on the. So you sat there in a tank, like
Were you in that tank?
I'm on the gun and I'm looking through the sight, and I was the captain's gunner at the time. So we're like the lead tank sat there, and I'm looking through the sights. That window, my midday, you're like that. It's 1:45, and you're like 2 minutes to stand down. They've complied, and then you're back. An hour later, you're sat in the naff eating a chip butty, having a laugh at the joke. Like it's just crazy.
All right, so why did you get out of the military?
I ask myself that every day. Why did I get out of the military? I guess the whole camaraderie thing had changed. I was 24. I guess I saw the life that a lot of people had that stayed in, no wife, no kids, no family. They were just bitter, old full screws who had done 15 years in the army and didn't really have anything. I didn't really want that. So I guess I just wanted more out of life, and I'd done everything I wanted to do. Didn't like being back in Catterick and didn't want to be at Recce Regiment. So there was all that stuff all in together that kind of pushed me out.
So why prison service?
Because I come out of the army. So I guess I did a year between the prison service and the army, or maybe a couple of years. I think it was 2 years. I was doing different jobs. I worked in some psychiatric units. I did a year or so working on water treatment plants, servicing sewage works. And it was just, I hated it. And I missed the army so much. I missed the uniform so much, that life. And I think there was just a part of me that wanted to go back and do it again, but I couldn't go back in the army. This time I'd met a fantastic lady who I'm still married to now. I didn't want to go back abroad. Tensions around the world were getting worse. People were going to Afghanistan regular. They were going to Iraq regular. It was tour after tour. And I knew what that was going to be like if I went back in. I didn't want that life. So the prison service presented itself to me. And I thought, why not? It's a disciplined service.
How did it present?
Do you know what? I was just job searching. I saw it on, I think it was Indeed of all places. And I remember saying to my wife at the time, sorry, she wasn't my wife. We weren't married at that point. I remember saying, oh no, sorry, I was married. I was married. And I was like, this looks really good. Money's equivalent really to what I'm on now. It wasn't great. I think it was 17,000 you started on. But it might just be back in uniform. It might be back in the life. I'm going to give it a shot. So I did.
What year were you when you did your prison training?
I think it was 2006.
2006.
Yeah.
And what was that training like?
So the interview to get in was quite hard because you had to do a maths exam and an English exam, and then you had to do what was called... I can't remember what they called it, but it was face-to-face scenario. So you had 5 scenarios. You went into a room, there was someone in there, and you had to deal with the scenario. And it was all, I mean, I should have known back then, it was all virtue signal based. It was all, there's a disabled person trying to get in my shop and I don't want them in here. And I'm this black guy and I'm being racially abused. How are you going to deal with it? So you just had to deal with it. And they were really good actors. They were all screws that had been like in for years. So then you had to deal with that. And I aced all that, but I failed the maths. I failed the maths exam the first time because like, my missus will kill me for this. I'm not the smartest guy. I'm not academic. I never was academic. I flunked maths at school and I failed it. And they gave me the option to resit it. So I studied maths. I studied it because I wanted it so bad. Mm-hmm. That's who I am. If I want something bad enough, I'll work at it. And I studied maths and I went in and I passed it the second time. And I went to a training place called Newbold Revel. And it was almost like being back at school, but for prison officers. You had lessons that you had to go in. You had to do physical training. You had to do control and restraint training. I think it was 2 weeks residential. But it did not prepare me for what I was going into. It did not prepare me.
2 weeks training.
2 weeks training. And they don't even do that now, I don't think. I'm pretty sure when I got out, it was straight onto the shop floor.
Where were you assigned to?
What prison?
Yeah.
HMP Stocken.
Was that?
It's Rutland. in between Leicester and Nottingham.
Okay, it's in the middle of the country.
Yeah, middle of nowhere. There was 2 jails there at the time. There was Stocken and Ashwell, I believe it was called. Ashwell rioted to the point that they shut the prison down. They destroyed it, and it never opened again. I don't even know if it's still there. I don't know if they flattened it or not, but yeah.
So I assume you were assigned to a category of male prisoners.
Yeah, so I just want to talk about categories for a minute to do with prisons, because there's always this massive misconception that there's A cat, B cat, C cat, and D cat. And A cat are the worst and D cat are the best. And it doesn't always work like that. So A category prisoners tend to be the really violent ones, the ones who are the biggest threat to public safety. But one of the huge factors in being in an ACAT prison is your means and ability to escape. So you'll have the top gangsters there because they've got all the money and they've got all the people that want to bust them out. You've got the IRA, Al-Qaeda. So you've got the dangerous ones. But you go to a CCAT prison, people go, oh, that was easy then. You didn't have anyone dangerous. Well, we had the most dangerous prisoners. We had the street criminals who had nothing to lose. The wife beaters, the thugs, the section thingy offenders that like touching people. Like, we had the worst of the worst, and lifers. Like, it wasn't an easy jail to be in.
Yeah, what I've noticed is, because in America it's super max, medium, minimum, but in the highest security levels there's the least violence, because the people are so serious in there. When it does kick off, they know it's going to go down. In the minimum camp, they got hundreds of prisoners stuffed in a warehouse, and it's mayhem and constant fights because they're all trying to prove, who's the biggest badass, especially the youngsters.
Yeah, and it was just the same, just like that so even at Stocken, we had a lifer wing. The lifer wing was the best wing to be on. Them lifers aren't going to mess up. Most of the lifers in our jail had already done 20 years or 30 years. Some of them had done 30 years. Some of them had been in prison longer than I'd been on the planet. And they're getting ready for release. So if they mess up, another 10 years on their sentence. They can't afford to mess up. So they're the best prisoners to be working with.
So you're saying, what category you at first assigned to? So you were assigned to category C. And what was your responsibility and role at that point?
Well, when I first joined, I didn't have one. To be fair, I didn't even think I was going to stay, because my first day, so I went to have a look round. And you go and meet a governor, and the governor has a conversation with you, and then a prison officer shows you around. And I can't even explain what it is like going into a prison. For a start, the security going in, they're getting the keys, they're going through the searches, and when you actually get in there, it's gate after gate, door after door, and the smell is like nothing you could ever imagine. It's not a bad smell, but it's not a nice smell. It's just weird. So
sweat and bleach and piss.
And it's all in together, and everywhere smells the same. And I've never smelled anything like it since. And you can't equate anything to that smell. And it was just, so I'm walking around with this guy. He's one of the PTIs, one of the physical training guys that works in the gym, and he's showing around, this wing's here, this wing's here. And then this con walks past. I hadn't seen any prisoners at this point. And this con walks past, and the PI speaks to him. You all right, Matt? Yeah, good. And he walks off, and he says, he's one of our lifers. And he was dressed head to toe in white. And I went, is that why he's wearing all white? And the screw went, no, that's because he works in the kitchen. I was like, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, that makes sense. So he goes off, and I think, I've just walked past the first person I've ever known who's a murderer. I've never, and this guy's just walking past like he hasn't got a care in the world. So this was on the way up to what's called the centre. The centre's where all the governors spend their time. And I went in to speak to this governor, Governor L, I'll call her. And I might as well have been a piece of shit. She just looked at me like I was, a piece of dirt. She just looked at me like I was nothing. And she said, she's a big woman. She said, why here? And I said, well, I applied, and there was several different prisons I could have gone to. There was Whitemore, which is Cat A. There's Watton, which is a prison where people like children. And there was Ashwell, which was next door. And then there was Morton Hall, which was women. And I said, Ashwell didn't have any places. I don't want to work with them kind of offenders. I don't want to work with women, and I don't want to go to a Cat A. So, I haven't got much choice other than here. And she went, well, Watton will be closer for you. You're from Boston. Yeah. Wharton would be closer for you. And I said, well, I know, but I don't really want to go to one. Well, it'd make more sense for you to be there. And I'm thinking, she don't want me here. And so we had the whole conversation, and I said, look, this is where I want to be. And she said, well, we'll make a decision in due course. Okay. So they made a decision. They let me go there. And I remember my first day, I went in, I said, what wing am I on? Oh, we don't know. So what do you mean you don't know? No one's assigned you to anything. And I was like, well, what? And I couldn't have felt any less wanted if I tried. So they said, just go down to the SEG. Just go down to the SEG and spend the day down there with them. And that was it. I stayed segregation unit then for the first 4 years that I was in the prison service. And the SEG is, I mean, if prison's unique, the segregation unit is double unique. You go in there, the screws that are in there are the hardest screws, the longest serving screws. And this was then, not now, this was then. This was when it was a SEG. It wasn't a care and separation unit. It was the worst of the worst prisoners. And this SEG was like something like a dungeon. You went in, everything was painted grey. It smelt mouldy. The screws in there all made me look like a dwarf. I mean, I'm not the tallest guy, but like some of these guys, 6'7", 19 stone, and they're huge. And I remember walking in, and most of them didn't speak to me. And one screwman went, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm Officer Hutchinson. I'm here for first day. They sent me down here." "Oh, right. Well, you might as well sit there and don't say anything." Okay, I will. And I sat there, and everyone just carried on buzzing around me. No one really said anything to me all day. And a couple of people would come in and say, "Oh, have you got your book? Yeah, your POELT book that you have to fill out. Right, do this. Do you know how to make a brew?" "Yeah." Like, I just said, "Yeah." And they just sat and looked at me and went, "Well, can go on then." Okay. So I went and made them all a brew, sat back down. "Anything I can do now?" "Yeah, when we finish these brews, we'll have another one." And I got in with them. Oh, sorry, I've knocked the mic. So I got in with them, and it turns out a lot of them were. I got in with them, and I've got personality. I like to have a laugh. I don't mess around. I don't mix my words. I've always been like that, and they liked me. I was ex-military, so they liked me. And within a couple of weeks, I was one of them. Do you know what I mean? I was in with the block screws, and I hadn't met my mentor at this point. So he was a block screw, and he was off on annual leave. And I remember coming in, and everyone had said about this guy. I won't say his name, but because he's probably going to watch. And he said. They said, "Oh, you wait till he comes back. You wait till he comes. Oh, you're in for." Everyone would go, "Who's your mentor?" "Officer D." And that's you just get that. "Oh, have you met him yet?" "No." "Oh." So I'm panicking. And I remember walking in. I walked in the SEG one morning, and he was there. And they said, "Oh, this is Hutch. This is Officer D." I said, "All right." And he looked at me and he went, "Do you like tits?" I went, "Yeah, I guess so." And he opened the Sun newspaper and threw it on the desk. He went, "Have a look at them then and prove that you like tits." And I went, "Yeah, I do. I like them." He went, "No, lean right over and have a look." So I leaned right over and I put my arms on the desk. I was having a look, and as I did, he went, whack, kidney shot right in the side, bent me over. He went, "Welcome to the SEG, kid." Like that. And I'm like that. Oh, and everyone's laughing. And that, I soon learned, was cultural. That was it. And I must have taken 200 kidney shots in my career, and I probably gave 200 to other screws as well, because you'd just be stood, someone would walk up behind you, just dig you one in the ribs. That was just the life. It was the way it was. So then that put me into the life of the prison service in the SEG.
So take us through your first day in the SEG. What responsibilities did you do?
Oh, nothing. Made tea, washed the cups, made tea, washed the cups, probably mopped, and right, we're going to serve lunch. You go around and serve lunch and just stand with the screws while they serve lunch to all the cons. Don't talk to any of the cons, don't unlock anybody, don't put anyone on you just didn't do anything, just watched.
So was that your first major interaction with the prisoners, was serving the food? That would have been, and you don't even have interaction, because in the SEG they stand against the back wall, open the door, put the food in, shut the door, and that's it. There was never any real interaction. Hey, we hope you're enjoying the podcast. It's a word from our sponsor, Shady Rays, and it is the season of giving. Get the perfect gift for that special somebody, yourself or both. Our friends at Shady Rays have you covered with premium polarized shades and quick swap snow goggles that won't break the bank. Shady Rays is an independent sunglasses company that offers an unrivaled product that's just as good as any expensive pair we've worn. Durable frames and world-class optics for all outdoor adventures. And Jen's blonde locks aren't getting tangled.
In the tangle-free nose piece, so I can put it up in my hair like this. No catching.
With an extensive array of styles and colours, you're bound to find the perfect pair of Shady Rays sunglasses. And if you're into winter sports, their quick swap snow lenses move effortlessly between full sun to low light environments. That's not all. Shady Rays offers the most insane protection in all of eyewear. Every pair of sunglasses is backed by lost or broken replacements. If you lose or break your pair, even on day one, they will send you a brand new pair, no questions asked. Exclusively for our listeners, Shady Rays is giving out a very merry deal for the season. Go to shadyrays.com and use the code SHAUN for 50% off 2+ pairs of polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself the shades rated 5 stars by over 250,000 people. That's shadyrays.com, Sean, SHAUN, for 50% off or 2 more pairs of polarized sunglasses. Link in the description box if you're watching this on YouTube. Thanks for supporting our sponsor. Back to the podcast. Cheers.
I can't remember the first wing that I went on to. But wings are very different to the seg. There's just prisoners everywhere. And I remember being on wings. I remember the first time I walked past a wing, where it was when the first day that I'd been shown around. I remember walking past a wing door and there's all cons stood at the window looking out. And there's a load of them and I can see them all on the wing. And all that's between me and them is a door and a gate. And I remember looking and it frightened me. Like, I'd been to Bosnia, but this frightened me. And I went home and I said to my wife, I don't know if I want to do this or not. Because I can't imagine being on that wing with all them people. You're just going to go put me in there. And I do remember the first probably 3 months or so being terrified. You go on a wing, you open a door, and if it's nearly gym time, you open the door and they're all trying to get out. No, you can't go, lads. You can't go because it's not time yet. Oh, just let us off, Gov. Just let us off. You're like, and you've got to tell 30 or 40 people that are all trying to get to the gym. Sorry, right? Can I come past you now and leave you locked on the wing? It's intimidating. It is intimidating.
In the early weeks then, was there any violence? Did anything go off?
So stuff went off all the time. It was a daily occurrence. I can't remember a day in the prison service where I didn't hear an alarm. I remember days where I didn't get involved in restraints, but some days you'd be restraining 3 or 4 or 5 times a day. My first memory of seeing, or I didn't even see, hearing violence was in the old segregation unit. So they built a new block, which was most of my career was spent, but there was an old seg and we were sat in adjudications. So adjudication is almost like going to court. A prisoner does something wrong, they have to sit in front of a governor and the governor will take their privileges off them or they'll find them not guilty or whatever. So you sit in adjudication. How adjudication works, it's like a little room with a table, governor sits at one end and there's a chair at the other, and you walk the prisoner in and you say, give your name and number to the governor and wait to be seated. Okay, name and number to the governor, they stand behind the chair. They sit down, pull their chair, and then you sit behind their chair with your foot on the chair. So they can't push the chair out and fly over the desk. And I'm sat in there with this con, and the other screw that's in there is one of the big guys. And we're sat there, and there's this room with a little door, a corridor, and then the cells are straight opposite. And this con's banging on this door, push. He's giving F you and F this and oh, dude. And the governor, we'll call him Governor B, didn't even look up from his paperwork. He's just like that. And he just says to the other officer, Officer C, quieten him down. And I just kind of looked at him and went, yes, Gov. And he got up, he unfolded himself out of a chair because he's huge, opens the door, he wears the keys, cell door opens, just there, bosh, just there loads of thudding and crashing and bashing. Cell door shuts, screw comes back in, sits back down, thank you. And that's it. Like, I was like, what has just happened out there? Like, that was the most surreal, insane thing. But I didn't get hands on. So restraint was part of the job. Putting your hands on prisoners because you're doing it for your safety. You're doing it for everyone else's safety. The first time that I was involved in a restraint, I remember the con. I can remember the con's name. I can remember the 2 other screws that were involved with me. And they said, right, we're gonna go and issue this guy some paperwork. He's getting a warning. So we went in. We opened his cell, and he became really aggressive. He flew at one of the other screws, And at that point, it's restraint for the safety of everyone around you. So grab the con, down on the floor, twisting him up, and you use pain compliance, so it's wrist locks, and we're down on the floor, and restraining this guy. And I looked at his face, and he was screaming. But he wasn't screaming because he was angry, he was screaming in pain because we was twisting him up. And the other two screws just didn't seem bothered. And I'd been involved in a lot of violence. I'd been involved in a lot of fighting. I'd been to war, but I'd never had 3 people on one. And I found it really hard. The first restraint really hard, psychologically really hard, not physically because there's 3 on 1. And the other 2 screws they're just involved in it. And I remember coming out afterwards and I felt, I don't want to say ashamed. I don't really know how I felt, but I didn't like it. I did not like it at all. But that become the norm. There was restraints all the time. And the more you did it, the more it just become natural. The more you justified what you was doing, the more it become natural. Restraining the prisoner, use of force paperwork goes in, he become refractory. We was defending ourselves. He was not complying. And before you know it, the prison service just becomes a revolving door of violence.
What was your most difficult restraints?
So I can tell you a hard restraint. So there was a con who was American, and he was an American footballer, and he was huge, and not just huge big, he was fat, and he was getting deported, but he was American in the UK on a Jamaican passport. So I don't know the ins and outs of how, but he was. So he was getting deported back to Jamaica. The only problem was he was homosexual. So if he was going to go to Jamaica, they were going to kill him. And there was 2 other people that were getting deported, and he says they know that I'm gay. Like, as soon as I get off that plane in Jamaica, they're going to kill me. You can't send me there because they don't accept that. And he was like, well, you're going. And he was like, well, I'm not. Well, you are. So he's in the seg, and he's saying, and he's the nicest con. Like, the cons, when we'll get into it in a bit, but cons weren't bad. Not all cons were bad. Nicest con, polite, friendly, he was decent. And he just said, I'm not going. What are you going to do if I don't go? Well, we'll put you on the transport. Well, crack on then. So we're sat in the office down the seg, and I remember there must have been 6 of us down there, and some of the big lads. I was like, what are we going to do? Like, we're going to have to restrain him. It's like, yeah, but how? How do you restrain someone? That's so we'll just go in and do it. So we went in, and normally for a restraint, if it's a planned restraint, you get kitted up, you take shields, you have a team of 4, and you have a team of 4 on standby just in case it goes bad. I can't even tell you how many people were down there. We didn't get kitted up because he wasn't doing anything wrong. Like, you can get kitted up if people are refusing to come out of the cell or whatever, but he had said he wasn't going, but he wasn't really doing anything wrong. So it wasn't going to be, so we opened the door and we said, come on, it's time to go. Not going. Oh, not going, y'all. I don't want to bust the accent, but not going, y'all. Well, okay, if you don't go, we're going to restrain you. Okay, crack on. So we jumped on him. And I mean, the screw that was on his head. So the first thing you do is hand on the back of the neck, head down. So they're straight down, head between the knees. Couldn't bend him over. Couldn't bend him forward. There's 2 of us trying to get his left arm, me and another screw. Couldn't move his arms. His arms were like that. We couldn't move them. So this went on for about 15 minutes in his cell fighting him. And it was staff assistant segregation unit, so everyone's coming down. We're trying to fight this con, and he's not even fighting, and he's ragging the biggest guys around like they're nothing, throwing 2 people on one arm against a wall, and we're freaking fighting him. And then he just changes and drops to the floor and stops responding and just lays there. So we restrained him and was holding him in restraints, but he's just laid still. And we're like, what are we going to do now? Well, we're going to have to carry him. Like, this guy weighs like 20 stone. I'm knackered. I've been fighting him for the last 20 minutes. So there's a technique in control and restraint for carrying. You don't just pick them up. You do it in a certain way. So we got him in the position we needed to. If I remember rightly, it's a 4-man carry. But even 4 people carrying 20 stone of dead weight is hard. So we carried him out the cell. We got him through the first door, through the next door, and someone went, rest. And that's when you stop to rest. So we stopped to rest, and some more people come in to swap over. And as we stopped to rest, we relaxed. He went, bosh, kicked this screw in the face, knocked him flying. So then we had to jump on him again, fighting him in the middle of the corridor. I mean, I can't even tell you how many screws there was. So, I mean, this went on for like an hour, probably an hour fighting him in the corridor before he finally gave up, right? The funny thing is, we got him out the back door of the SEG into the yard where the transport was waiting. They had sent civilian transport to pick him up, two civilian, G4S, two G4S officers. Like, and they went, what are we going to do if he kicks off? Like, it's yours now. Like, you're in, like, if he kicks off. That restraint. So most restraints was 3 staff, 4 at most. That restraint, there was 26 use of force paperworks went in. It took 26 staff, nearly 2 hours to move him 100 yards.
Do you know what happened to him after you handed him over?
Oh, that's gone. They're gone then. They're gone. And that's the end of it. And then you go back in and you put the kettle on and have a brew and sit and talk about it. Back to normal.
What was your second most problematic restraint?
I remember, so I can tell you a couple. I didn't restrain this guy, but I was there for this. And this leads on a little bit to how the prison service started to change. So, I'll tell you this one first. So there was a con that was down the SEG because he was getting BCA'd. He was getting recategorized for his level of violence. He had been in the jail before. He got previous escape attempts. He was very violent and they shouldn't have sent him to us. So they put him in the SEG. Big Scottish guy, ex-para, huge he was, and tall. And he was in the SEG and he was saying, well, I'm not going back to BCAT. I'm not going to try and destroy the Scottish accent. But he was like, you, flip you, like, all that. So I said to the screw I was on with in the SEG, I said, what are we going to do? Are we just going to get kitted up and we're going to drop him, go biff him? It's like, we're going to have to do this one by the book. Because you didn't always. Sometimes you just went in and dropped him. We're going to have to let the centre know, this guy's really dangerous. We've got to do it all properly. Okay. So we rang the centre up and this governor answered, female governor, been in the prison service 30 seconds. Like, gone fast track governor. And she was like, have you tried talking to him? Yes, we've tried talking to him. Currently, he's naked. He's covered head to toe in his own poo. And he's refusing to come out of his cell. He doesn't really want to talk. She went, well, don't get kitted up yet, fellas. I'll come down and talk to him. I was like, okay, that's fine if that's what you want to do. So she comes down, she comes in the SEG. Right, what cell's he in? Cell 1, first cell on the left, spur 1. She went up, she knocked on his door like she was knocking on a teenager's door. She went, Mr. Smith, it's the governor speaking. And all you heard come back was, flip off, you wee Anglo-Saxon slag. And she just turned to us and went, I don't think he wants to talk. It's like, no, I don't think he does. So they got kitted up, so full protective gear, and then over stuff on as well because it's dirty protest. I didn't go in. I don't know why I didn't. I just wasn't part of the team. I think it's because there was big screws there and I wasn't huge. And I remember listening to him fight him, and it took 4 big screws a good 15 minutes to subdue him. And when they brought him out, he was naked, he was covered in, and it stunk. But that was, when you talk about the hardest restraints, that could be daily. The, hard restraints didn't just have 1 or 2. I could tell you 100 stories of restraints where it's been a blood protest, restraints where it's been a dirty protest.
What's a blood protest? Where
somebody cuts themselves, lets the blood out, and then just spreads it everywhere. And they're the worst. I take a dirty protest over a blood protest all day long.
Describe going into your worst blood protest.
So it was an old guy. Can't remember his name, but he was about 70. And he had been a homeless guy for years. He liked being in prison because he got free food and free meds and looked after. But he was a little bit odd, obviously, because he would cut himself like on his arm, and then he would push a spoon underneath the skin to keep the wound open, and then he would let the blood out into a container. And then I remember I was doing a count one day, and I opened this flap to have a look in, and you could just see blood everywhere. And I don't know if you know how much blood spreads. You only need a little bit, and he was getting pints of it and spreading it all over his cell, all over the floor. He had written Nazi screws on his wall in blood, and the floor was just congealed blood, and we had to go in and restrain him and bring him out for his own safety as well as anything else. And I remember
slippery.
It's slippery. It kind of goes like jelly, or it makes me want a gip thing. And the smell of a blood protest is like nothing I can describe. I can taste it now, sat here.
Like
have
iron.
You ever had a sore throat when it's a little bit raw at the back? And it's like that all the time. And iron. And it's just the worst thing. And it goes everywhere. And you're wearing white shirts, so it's absolutely horrendous. Yeah, it's nasty.
So you'd rather go to a poo protest one than a blood protest one?
Yeah, so a dirty protest. I remember a con who was on a dirty protest in the seg, and said we're gonna go get this. We're gonna get him out. We're gonna put him in, because they had dirty protest cells. So when they dirty protest in a normal cell, you put them in the dirty protest cell, because then you just leave them in there to do whatever it is they want to do. And we went in to get this. We went in to get this con, and we went down. Opened the door, he stood in there, and he's naked, there's poo everywhere, and he's got his hands out. So he comes in, you've got a shield, so you have a big shield to protect yourself. And I was observing, and they said to the con, "What you got in your hands?" I don't know if you'll see this on camera, but he's got his hands out like that, and he opens his hands like that, and he looks, he goes, "Nothing." And the screw went, "What you got in your hands?" And as he looked at his hands again, the screw with the shield just hit him with his shield, bounced off the back wall, hit the floor, and as he was coming down, they just dropped the shield, clotheslined him, jumped on him, and they're rolling around, and there's excrement everywhere. The guy's got his face in it, so he's on the floor, he's got his face in it. And as we're going, we realise he's packed all his stuff into bags. So all his personal stuff, he's got in carrier bags on his bed so it don't get covered. Honestly. And then, so that con, we did that. He went into dirty protest. They got him off his dirty protest. About 2 weeks later, I was on the meds hatch, and I could hear him talk. He didn't know I was in the meds bit. He was in the queue. Couldn't see me around the corner. I could hear him talking. And he says, this con goes, "I'll tell you now, if they don't give me my meds, I'm kicking off, and whatever screws in there, I'm going to flatten him." And this other con who had been on the dirty protest says, "You don't want to do that, mate. You'll end up in the seg." He went, "Yeah, I'm not bothered about the seg." And he went, "Honestly," he said, "they hit me so hard with a shield that I pissed myself." Because you don't want to go down there, it's brutal. So yeah, it was, but that was the worst of the worst. You know, when it was like that, it was bad. Every day you go in and it's a job. You go on a wing, you go into the seg, you serve the food, you go to the seg. It's just a job, and you don't think about the other stuff. You just don't.
What were your biggest challenges in the first year?
Relationships with other screws. That was a real challenge. Old school screws, because old school screws, some of them didn't talk to new people for the first year. I remember walking in, I was going from the old seg to the MDT unit, which was the mandatory drug training unit, and I'd got my keys out. I was just about to open the door, and I heard keys on the other side of the lock, and the lock opened and the door opened, and there was an old school screw come through, and he saw me with my keys in my hand waiting to go through the door. He looked me in the eyes, he turned his back on me, he shut the door, he locked it, he barged past me, and he carried on walking. Didn't even acknowledge that I wanted to go through the door, didn't try and hold it open, didn't speak to me. And that could be a daily thing. You could be working in the seg with 3 screws who don't even acknowledge you're there. And then suddenly they'll just go, "Have you not made a brew yet?" So that was a real challenge. And I think understanding that prisoners are just human beings. And there was bad ones. I'm not going to sit here and kiss the ass of every prisoner, because there was bad prisoners. That's why they're there. They've committed crimes. They've done some horrendous things. But some people that are in there have made mistakes. Some people in there have got in a fight in a nightclub, like I did so many times as a teenager, and hit the wrong person, and they've fallen wrong, or they've lost their temper and they've picked up a glass and thrown it, or they've stolen something. I'm not saying stealing ever is right or wrong, but they've made a bad judgment call. They've sold drugs when it's illegal, you know. But they're not bad people. They might have committed crimes, but some of them are decent. And I think trying to process that in my mind, my understanding of what a criminal was, trying to process it when I'd spent so long working with these old school screws. They hated every con. We hate cons. They hated governors. They hated other screws. Most of them hated themselves. They just sat miserable and grumpy all the time. And there was screws that were like that. They were just grumpy, miserable all the time. So finding that balance was really difficult.
So you're right. So there is a variety of prisoners, but then you've got the prisoners who are classified as adults attracted to kids.
Yeah.
Did you have to interact with them?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So this was really hard. Working with not just adults attracted to kids, but adults that would force themselves on women or on men. And they were among us. People seem to think that they all go to jails that are specifically for them, but they don't. So I don't know if it's still the same, but back then, only if you admitted your crime did you go to a jail specifically for that crime, because then you could do the treatment programs. You could do, I'm assuming I can say the sex offender treatment program. It was actually, that's what it was called. But if you didn't admit your crimes, you just went to a normal jail. So there was loads of them. And
so let me get this straight then. So if they admit the crime, they go to the program, and that's all them in the program.
Yeah.
If they don't admit the crime, they go to the general population.
Yeah.
In a Cat C prison.
A Cat C prison.
So they mix him with all the other prisoners.
Yeah, because they didn't need to do any, because they weren't going to do the programs, so they didn't need to be there.
So what happens when the other prisoners find out what they're in for?
They get beaten up. They get shanked or slashed. Or
Did you come across that?
Yeah, I saw that loads. I saw it loads. I remember a kid that was in for being attracted to his own children, and he'd done some horrendous stuff.
No.
Yeah. I mean, that's not just. Look, I tell you, I don't know how graphic you want me to tell you, but there was. So I'll tell you this one first. Guy was attracted to his own children. He was an Asian fella. He just went about his business. We knew what he had done. We knew what he was in for, and he was so nonchalant about it. Like, just never admitted it. And just went about his business. We knew what he was, but he just associated around the wing. And somehow, obviously, Screws wouldn't tell the cons because that would be a breach of protocol. But somehow, cons found out what they had done, and then they would get boiling water thrown at them, or they'd get slashed. The worst slashing I've seen was a slashed face of a sex offender, and it was 2 blades in a toothbrush down his face, and it went from his temple to his chin here. And when we got to him, it was flapping open, and you could see you could see his teeth, and it was all flapping, but they couldn't sew it, because that's why they put 2 blades. So they put 2 blades in a toothbrush, so it does 2 wounds, because then there's nothing in the middle to sew it to. And there was blood all down him, and it was all hanging all out, and oh man, it was horrific.
How does that get treated then if it won't?
Well, the hospital will, when they go to hospital, I'm assuming, if I remember right, he ended up in the seg on what's called Rule 45 own protection, because then everyone knew what he was. And it was, if I remember, it was just steri strip, like gluing it together and then patched up. Yeah, it was pretty nasty. But what he had done was pretty nasty. And again, I'm not saying that anyone deserves anything, but people who are watching can make their own mind up, you know?
Any other stories like that?
Yeah, I've got. So this wasn't someone that was attracted to children, but this was a guy he had mental health issues. He had suffered. He was ex squaddy. There was a lot of ex squaddies inside, and he had mental health issues. He had got PTSD, and he was quite angry and violent a lot of the time. And when he didn't get his own way, he would kick off, and he would get restrained, and he would put back in his cell. And I remember being sat in F-wing office, like the fishbowl again, this is where the guy got potted. I sat in there, and I seen him coming up the corridor, and he's got his hand like that, and in his hand there's blood all down his face. And I'm like, what is going on here? And he was from the northeast. He was a Geordie. I can't do a Geordie accent. I'm not going to try. And he just went like that, and he held his hand out, and half his ear, like the bottom half of his ear, was in his hand, and he had hacked it off with a razor blade, and he got it in his hand, and he was like, I need to go to hospital. I've cut my ear off. So I was one of the ones that took him to the hospital in a taxi. You go in taxis to the hospital, all cuffed up. You cuff to the prisoner and you go out. And he thought they were just going to sew this bit of ear back on. And they went, well, we can't sew your ear back on. And he's like, what happens now then? He's like, we've got to cauterize it. So I sat there in the thing, and they've got this, I don't know if you know what cauterizing is, but it's like a welding tool. And they're just going, zzz, zzz, and the smell, you can smell burning flesh, and he's screaming, and they kind of welded his ear back together. Yeah, it was, and that smell, there's only one other time, other than the blood letting out, there's probably loads of times where the smells got to me, but the worst one was when we took a con, and he was a really decent con, but he had been buying steroids within the jail, because obviously there is drugs and things that get in the jail. And he had been injecting into his backside, and it had gone septic. And so we're in the taxi with him, and he's huge, great big long black guy, big long dread, just sat in his taxi, and he's having to sit like that because he can't sit on the arse cheek because it's septic, and the smell is like nothing. And it was a hot day. We was in a taxi, the windows are all up. Oh man, and it was horrendous, and things like that. I'm saying now laughing about it because it's just the norm. It's just what you do. What did you do today? Oh, I took a prison to hospital who had got a septic bum cheek. It was just, and that level of violence and injury, and that was just the norm.
So, going back to the adults who were attracted to kids then,
yeah,
did any of them get killed?
No, I've never seen anyone get killed. I mean, I've heard stories of other prisons, and you've spoke to people as well. I've never known them get killed, but I've seen some really serious violence, a lot of serious assaults, but not. And there wasn't any. There was a couple of deaths when I was at the jail, but there was never anyone murdered. I suppose that's one thing I say. I've never seen anyone murdered, but it was. So when we talk about these people, I don't think, and this is something that's really close to my heart. I work with teenagers now. One of the reasons I work with teenagers now is because I think the real pandemic. Are we allowed to say pandemic out loud on YouTube? I don't know. The real pandemic in the UK is the people that are attracted to children pandemic, because we don't realise what the full scale of it is. We really don't. And I know that you've done a lot of stuff around a prominent figure within within the BBC and things, but like the amount of these people there was in this jail and some of the stuff that they were doing. We had one con. So I've got this story that I'm going to tell, and it links in on the two. So we had one con who had been found. It was his first offence. Right, and he had been found with 165,000 indecent images of children and animals on his computer, and so I won't tell you his sentence yet. So 165,000 indecent images, and what they said was that the police task force that had to deal with it said that they were the worst. They were class, I can't remember how they classed them. I think it was 3. They were class 3 images. Some of the people that had dealt with it had to have counselling because it was depicting torture and murder of babies. Right? So we'll leave that one there. We'll come back to that in a minute. I'll tell you this story of, we got a call in the SEG one day. It was me and Officer P was on. And they said, you've got to come down to K-Wing. We've got these 2 cons. They're getting B-catted, Hussein brothers. You've got to come and get them. You've got to come and get them. We need to take them to the SEG because they're a serious risk of escape and they've got all this money and blah, blah. I was like, okay then. So Mr. P says, come on, Hutch, me and you will go get them. I said, well, there's 2 of them. There's 2 of us. I said, yeah, but like normally for one con, you take at least 3 or 4. No, it'll be all right. It'll be all right. We'll just go lift them, bring them down there. I'm sure they'll be fine. I was like, okay, then we'll do that. So I went down to K-Wing. What cell? Say cell K30, last one on the right. The double cells were all at the end. So Officer P opens the flap, looks in. You always look in before you open the door. Looks in, shuts it. He looks at me, he says, Hutchie, what cell? K30. I go, K30. He said, this can't be the right cell. Come in, let me have a look. Open the flap, and there's this little Asian fella. Like, he can't be much more than 9 stone. And he sat there with his legs crossed. He's got a bowl of noodles like that. He's just eating and watching telly. I was like, it's a bit odd. All right, let's go in. So we went in, and there's him in there, and in the corner there's his brother. And they can't have been much more than 5'2", 5'3" between them. They probably didn't weigh as much as Mr. P put together. Are you the Hussein brothers? That wasn't their real name, by the way. Are you the Hussein brothers? Yes, officer. How can we help you? It's the poshest English accent you've ever heard. And I looked at Mr. P. I said, is this a wind-up? Like, what is going on here? So we lifted him. We started taking him around the SEG and was like, do you know what this could be about? And they said, well, we suppose it could be about our confiscation order. I was like, well, how much is your confiscation order for?
I hope you're enjoying the podcast. I've got some exciting news to announce. Michael Francis is coming back to tour the UK in 2024. The Remade Mentor, the Michael Franzese story. Michael Franzese, once named one of the 50 most significant mob bosses in the USA by Fortune magazine, and a former member of the notorious Colombo crime family, will take you deep into the world of organized crime, sharing captivating tales and insights into the mafia's past, present, and future. Join us for an unforgettable evening with Michael Franzese, the original Goodfella, as he exclusively sits down with myself, Sean Attwood. With me as the host, there's going to be a no-holes-barred exploration of Michael Franzese's life, including his numerous arrests and jury trials that ultimately led to his pleading guilty to a federal racketeering charge, a 10-year prison sentence, and $15 million in restitution. You will have the unique opportunity to ask questions during an audience Q&A session, making this event a must-see for true crime enthusiasts and anyone curious about the underworld. Don't miss this explosive in-conversation with Michael Franzese. Live on stage in the UK, this exclusive in-person event will be held in various locations in the UK, Ireland and Scotland. Link in the description box below this video if you want to grab yourself a ticket. Back to the podcast. Cheers.
20 million each. So you've got £40 million between that. Yeah, they said, yeah, but we haven't got that. So what happened was they were inside for importing computer equipment, but not paying the tax or the importation tax. And they got people that are on customs and excise on their payroll, and they'd made millions and millions, but they were both very clever men. So they'd sat in open court. And the judge was like, right, you're going to represent yourselves? Yes. Okay, so what would you like to say? Well, I'd like to start by saying, and they started reeling off the name of all the undercover officers within the customs and excise. And they're like, you can't name them because it was all top secret because they're undercover. So the judge just went 20 years, gave them 20 years. So they've both got 20 years and they've got 20 million. So their means and their thing for escaping. Okay, so they got 20 years for evading tax, right? The guy with 165,000 indecent images of children. How many? How long?
I'm going to guess he got like 2 years.
9 months. So 20 years for tax evasion. And I'm not saying it's right, but the minute you start taking money off the government, you're screwed.
It just shows who the biggest mafia is, and it also shows that they do not prioritize crimes against kids and women. They prioritize the wrong stuff.
Yeah, this guy with the indecent images as well, he got restrained in the visits room because he sat near the area where the kids played and he was playing with himself.
No.
And he got restrained. Yeah. That's how he got outed for what he had done.
He should have been getting life.
Yeah. He was a disgusting creature.
That is absolutely sickening.
Disgusting creature. And
people in the chat, in the comments, are going to be outraged by this. Let us know what you think about that man, that monster getting 9 months in the comments in the chat, please.
Absolutely disgusting. And it wasn't just him. I was working in the SEG with a guy, and I'm gonna use, I want to use his real name, but I can't.
No real names.
I wish I could because, so let's just call him Earl. Because he looked like this, you remember that My Name is Earl, or the TV program? He looked a bit like a little hick hillbilly. He was horrible. And his rat face, and he got like a little bald patch like Friar Tuck. And he was in for forcing himself upon a 14-year-old girl in a park. And he had done his time. He was end of sentence. So we had to release him. End of sentence. There was no anything, but he had got these conditions that he couldn't return to his hometown. And he was open, and he'd say, I don't care, I'm going back there, and you'll never see me again until next time I'm in here for doing it again. And he would openly say that. And offender management had tried everything to have to keep him in, but you couldn't because the sentence is up. So offender management rang his local constabulary and said, you've got this guy, he's not allowed back to you guys, he's got a hostel in this town that he's saying he's not going to go to. And they went, oh yeah, we know him. We know who that is. Notorious. We'll send an escort. We'll send the police to come and get him. So we didn't tell him morning that he was getting released. Walked him to the gate. And instead of taking him through the human gate, the person gate, the door, the big gate opened where the vehicle was. And he's looking at us like this. Horrible little rat face. And they open, and there's these two big coppers. And they looked at him. They said, Earl, they looked at him and said, Mr. Earl, you're coming with us. Like, and his face just drained. And these coppers, you never see anything like it. Like, they were huge, and they grabbed him and they chucked him in the back of this meat wagon, and the gate shut, and off it went. So we went back down to the SAG. We're sat in the SAG, and the phone rings, and it's one of the girls from the admin block. Now, the admin block overlooks the gate going out, and she said, "Have you just released one?" I was like, "Yeah, it was Earl." She went, "It's just pulled over on the side of the road, the police van has, and it's rocking." And said the van was going boom, boom, boom. His cops were bashing him from side to side in the van. So I don't know what ever happened to him, but we never saw him again after that. So, but that's what the people that like children, that's the emotion it evokes in everyone, in civilians, in officers, in cons, in everyone, because it's just vile.
Have you got any stories about them with heartwarming endings like that one?
There's loads of heartwarming endings. Oh, so there was one guy. This is really tragic, and this is tragic. I won't say tragic, but so we release people. When they get released, they have to go and see their probation officer. And we had this guy who was getting released, and his probation meeting had been set for 2:00 in Bedford. And I mean, we was in Oakham, so it was a good trek to Bedford from there. Not huge, but a good trek. At 2:00 it was, but something had happened. I don't know what it was. But for some reason they weren't opening the gate, so we couldn't get released. So we were sat there waiting, and he didn't get released until I think it was 12:20. Oh no, it was after lunch. He got held up to lunch, so then they couldn't release him because it was lunch. That's right, they couldn't release him until it was lunch. After lunch, 1:15. All unlock come. So he got released from HMP Stocken at 1:15. He had to be in Bedford at 2:00. Didn't make it. They breached him. It was a breach of license. Straight back in. And he was like, well, what can I do? But the best one for straight back in that I remember was the con who got released in the morning. And it was a Wednesday morning he got released. And Wednesdays mornings were legal visits, so that's when the police come to see you, or when the solicitors come to see you, or parasites as we used to call them. So he gets released, and he goes out, and instead of using his money that he'd been given to get a taxi and a train ticket, he tried stealing a car in the car park with all the police visiting that day, and he got arrested in the car park trying to steal a car. And when he come back round and come back in, because we see it's like a revolving door, you see the same people, and we're like, what are you doing back? Oh, I got caught in a car, didn't I, Gov? Like, and then they're just normal. They're just back in. So yeah, that was that. So I was touching on how sickening some of the stories are, and how disgusting some of these individuals are. And we're not just talking about offences of a sexual nature towards people. It's the level of abuse there is towards people in the UK. And we had one lad. And he was part of a gang. He was a gangster. He was a gangbanger. I can't remember what town it was, but it was one of the black gangs. And he was in with all his brethren, and they were giving the fist bumps. But what they didn't realise was that he was in for emotional and physical abuse to his wife and child, and his child was 4 years old.
Oh no!
And this is one of the cases that stopped me reading what people were in for, because it really affected me at the time. And one of the crimes that he had committed was his 4-year-old didn't want to eat his tea, so he force-fed his child food until he made the child physically sick, and then he forced the child to eat its own vomit.
Oh, disgusting.
And this is someone that everyone was loving. All the other cons loved him. He was one of the street gang, wasn't it? And they had no idea what it was he was in for. No idea. And that kind of thing, them kind of vile acts, violence towards their wives, violence towards their children, it was so common.
Did he get outed?
So he didn't get outed for exactly what he had done. But what happened was, I'd got a good relationship. So what you do is you've got to make friends with these cons. You're walking the landings on your own with 200 prisoners. You can't have everyone hating you. You've got to be half decent. If you're not, you get potted. You get assaulted. It's just, so you've got to try and get on. The best way to get on is give your better cons, but your stronger cons, good jobs, wing jobs, where when everyone else is banged up, they're out. They're out cleaning. They're loving it. They get the cleaning done and then they're out on the landings. They're great jobs. Servery workers, an even better job because you get the pick of the food. So I would have decent cons doing my jobs, and 2 or 3 of this lad's boys that were in his gang were my wing cleaners. And they were like, you're going to give my boy a wing job? No, we're not getting a wing job. Oh, you've got him? No, I haven't. Why not? Well, I'm not going to tell you why not, but don't give people like him wing jobs. And the fact that we wouldn't do it put them on high alert that there was a real issue. And that wasn't one of the incidents where anyone ever got told what he did. But I remember him not staying on the wing very long after that. Just because that was, soon as someone thinks that's it, they're gone.
How difficult is it to manage the gangs in prison?
It's very difficult. You've got to be very clever with who you place where, who goes on what wing. You can't end up with too many of one gang on one wing because suddenly they're all in it together. But then they'll form their own little gangs within prison. You'll have the black community and the white community and the Asian, and that's how it is. And they have to manage themselves, because we can manage it to an extent. As an officer, you can manage it to an extent. You can stick to the rules, you can stick to the regime, you can bang people up when you need to, you can restrain people when you need to. But my very last role within the prison service was working on an induction wing, and I walked a landing of 200 prisoners on my own. Just me. So I'm not keeping that whole wing calm myself. Like, my presence on there with a radio and a baton isn't keeping it calm. The prisoners that want to behave and want to get on and want to get released, who want to keep it calm, that's why you've got to have your strong people on the serveries. I guess, I would have 2 good servery workers. I had 2 really good servery workers when I was on that wing, 2 travellers who, they were, I'm going to say typical travellers, but they were stereotypical travellers. They were decent guys. They'd been out thieving stuff. They'd gone to prison, but they just wanted to get on and get out. So whenever there was anything going on, they would either give me information that something was going on, or I'd go to them and say, this happening. So there was a specific incident. I remember we'd smelt hooch on the wing one day. So prison brew, they'd make their own alcohol, and it stunk. You could smell it a mile off. They would make it with oranges and fermented bread, and it would smell like yeast. And I remember smelling it. I searched everywhere. I knew it was in someone's cell. You can't search every cell. So I went to the 2 survey workers, and they were both gym buffs. And I said, there's hooch on this wing. And again, I'm not going to try and butcher the Irish accent. I said, no, Governor, there's not. I said, there is hooch on this wing, and I want it. And if I don't have it by lunchtime, there's no gym this afternoon. You can't do that. I said, well, I won't have to if someone brings me the hooch. And within an hour, this little kid had come to the office, black eye and a bucket of hooch. I mean, we don't even know, probably won't even need hooch. He just found the weakest person, give him a slap, take that up there, and that was it. We'd got it in so that we could have gym.
What was the biggest problems with the gangs? Imagine the drugs.
Well, no, not really. I suppose it was vying for power. It's not all about drugs. It's about power, about mobile phones, still running your empire from in the jail. That's what they were vying for. Who's running this? Who's doing that? So yes, there was drugs, but it wasn't like you see in the movies. It wasn't like everyone's taking heroin. We was enabling it. We was enabling it because all you had to do was go to the meds hatch with severe pain, and they're doling out pregabalins, gabapentins and tramadols and zopiclone and just meds after meds. And that was where the problem was with the meds they were giving out. Subutex.
So for the purposes of this interview, then, we're going to say white, brown, and green for the main drugs.
Oh, can't we say the actual drugs?
Yeah, it's all right. I'm going to mute it.
Apologies.
What you said it. Don't worry about it. So white, brown, and green. So when they're getting these packages in, then, of those substances, how do you deal with all that? Is it visitation? Have you got corrupt staff members bringing it in? Is it getting thrown over the fence?
So with the illegal substances they're bringing in, then they're bringing it in through visits. Like with visitors, I've seen it. I've seen a guy full on snog his mum, like tongs with his mum, to pass drugs from her to him. I've seen a mum go, because when you found out, you would then go watch back on the cameras so you could get the evidence. I've seen a mum go down her pants into her private parts, take the thing out, pass it to her son, and her son then take it and swallow it. So there's that. There is corrupt staff. There is corrupt staff. Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's grim, isn't it? You said you wanted the juiciest things, huh? Like,
this is the best stuff that people want to hear. Original, hard-hitting content.
Yeah, so there is that. There's bringing it in visits, but it got really hard for them to bring it in visits because you're searching people as they're coming in. You're getting intel. You've got drug dogs. It's really hard to. It's not as easy as it used to be. Then you've got the packages coming over. And you would do, the night staff would be doing patrols and you would find packages. I remember a number one governor, so this was hilarious. This package had come over and it had got the con's name on it. Who it was for and what wing he was on, right?
Oh.
Yeah, we'll call him the Terrible. I'm going to call him the Terrible because of what his name was. So we'll call him the Terrible. And this package had come over. We'd found it on the patrol in the morning. I hadn't, but I remember the screw that did. Found the package. And it was just before Christmas. It was about a week before Christmas. And this package was loaded. There was SIM cards and phones, and there was brown, and there was white, and there was green. There was everything in there, everything. And the number one governor put on a Santa costume with like the hat and everything and laid it all out on his desk. So it was all like lined up, and then put ho, 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 no effing Christmas for you, right? And then took a picture, and then they printed it off and they put it on this con's door for when he come back. So yeah, they got everything. And then 2 hours later, he's in the seg on own protection because he's promised all that to someone.
Oh, he owed a lot of people.
He's owed a lot of people because there's a lot of money in it. £500. As a screw, I had more offers. I could have been loaded. And it would start off as a joke. Oh, I don't suppose you'd bring us a phone in, would you, Gov? No. £500 straight into your bank, you know? No, I won't. But I could have done. £500 a time.
We interviewed an ex-officer, Lee, who was bringing up to 3 packages a day for £500 each.
Yeah, £500 each.
And his starting salary was 18k. But he got busted 2 years later. But it just keeps flowing, doesn't it? Because there's so much money in it.
Yeah. So I don't know the story. I haven't seen that. But do you know what happened to him? Did he go to prison for that?
Oh yeah.
Right. So I'll tell you this: we had a screw who got caught. I don't want to say too much about this, but I'm going to tell the story. But I'm going to keep it as a screw got caught, a female screw, and
how?
So there had been a bit of intel passed around. And she got sloppy. So what happened is she had been recruited at a young age as a gang to join the prison service.
Oh.
Yeah. So she was in and she was bringing stuff in, loads of stuff in. But what had happened was this big player who was on one of the wings, it was his girlfriend. And he was in the seg and she was doing shifts in the seg at night and then going to see him in his cell. But as always, there's no honour among thieves. Some con had found out, and to get himself out of the trouble one day, he said, well, this, and this. So then the intel starts. So then you start looking at things. But nothing happened to her because I don't know when this thing with this Lee happened, but to investigate an officer and to prosecute them, it costs millions. So it's easier to go, well, maybe you ought to try and resign. And we had women that were marched to the gate for having inappropriate relationships. Not going to investigate. You're best off resigning or you're going to get sacked. Then they resign. Then they don't have to do the investigation. And I've seen that probably 5 times in my career with people either bringing stuff in. There was a DHL worker, like the canteen guy, that was bringing in alcohol, and he got marched to the gate and asked to leave. There was a civilian woman that was having an affair with a con down in the same place, DHL. She was asked to leave. And then there was a female screw as well that was having an indecent relationship with a prisoner, and she was asked to leave. None of them got prosecuted.
So you're saying that the gangs now are getting people recruited specifically just to bring it in?
They were on that occasion. I know there was intel about another screw that I put this intel in myself. Someone had come to me and said, this officer is bringing in steroids for a gym con, and he's bringing him in. They took down his pants. He's meeting him in the gym. We'd got all the intel, and we put it in. And they pulled this screw one day on the way in on a routine, searched him and didn't find anything. And then so there was no further action after that. But what I was told then was he hadn't been recruited. He had just been another one. They'd said, young lad, only a young lad, bring it in. £500 the first time. But then the next time, £50. Well, it's 500 last time. Well, we've got evidence that you brought it in. So if you don't bring it in, we're going to grass you up. And that's what ends up happening. So it might be worth it to some. To me, it wasn't. I had a young family. I wasn't in there for that. I'm not corrupt. I would never have even been tempted. But for some...
Yeah, because they try to get you to bring in something lightweight, and then they say, now you've done that, you've got to bring this in, otherwise we're going to tell them you've brought that in.
Yeah.
And it goes up.
Yeah, and before you know it, you're bringing in stuff. You're putting yourself at being at risk of it going to prison for 9 years for nothing. Every day.
Yeah, Vanessa Frick, the prison governor we interviewed, she talked about only a percent of the packages get detected, and their percent was so high, the amount that was getting in was just astronomical.
So, to be fair, when I was in, packages and things coming in was getting really hard. That's why they started dealing the stuff they were getting from the meds hatch, the prescription drugs, the stuff that they were getting given, and it was easy. And we had a drug treatment wing, and on the drug treatment wing, they would have the green liquid you take for addiction, or you'd have tablets that you take for addiction. The tablets are a blocker; they stop the substances working. But what they were doing was they would get themselves on a script. I'm addicted. Get themselves on a script. And then they would put Vaseline in their mouth, put the tablets in the Vaseline. Show mouth, can't see it. Take the tablets out and then sell the tablets to somebody else because they were blockers. But if you cut it up and snorted it, it gave you a high. So that's what they were doing. So we got wind of this because we caught a guy. Someone said this prisoner's he's dealing these tablets. We know where he's got it. It's all sewn into his seams. He unpicks his seams, he sews his seams back up, and that's where he hides his tablets. So when you search him and you get him to strip and you check the pockets and stuff, you don't tend to check seams. So we did that, and we found, I think it was 23 or so of these Subutex, the white tablets on him. And so after that, they went, right, what we're going to do is we're going to, instead of giving them tablets now, we've got this new ingenious idea. It's all going to be powder form. So it's just going to be powder, lift your tongue, put it under your tongue, it dissolves, and then so you can't deal the tablets. We're not realizing quite how ingenuitive cons can be. What they were doing was, they were doing that. They were keeping the saliva as much as they could in their mouth. Then they'd regurgitate it into a bowl, so a plastic food bowl, smear it round the edges so it was really thin, put it on the radiator until it dried, then scrape it off so it was a powder, and then sell it, and then someone would then go and snort that. So they were snorting somebody's regurgitated phlegmy drugs.
Wow.
That's the desperation. That's the level.
Also shows, like you said, though, the ingenuity of people and the wasted talent.
Yeah. Oh, I can tell you a great story about that.
Please do.
So I was doing nights. Nights come around every so many weeks. And I was patrolling around you would patrol around the outside of the prison, checking everything. And I walked past, again, this was on K-Wing. I walked past, I seen this con stood in his window on a mobile phone, just as bold as anything. So back in the next day, put what's called an SIR in Secure Information Report, seen this. My mate, Officer P, he was like the human phone detector all over it. And he rang me at home and he went, do you definitely see that phone? I was like, yeah, definitely, right. He said, right, we're going to spin him. Yeah, do it. So they went in the next morning, busted his door open, spun his cell. Con's just laid on his bed. Yeah, that's fine. Spun him, couldn't find it. Sure it was there. Yeah. Next night, patrolled again, saw him again, stood in his window on his mobile phone. Right, must have it plugged. So plug in. Okay, I'll explain plug in. Plug in is where you hide something in your bottom, essentially. So
it's called keystering in America.
Oh, keystering, yeah, plug in. So yeah, plug in. Must have it plugged. So we had what was called a boss chair. A boss chair was like a metal detector that you sat on. It could detect if you had anything. So the next day, I'm at home. Right, we're going to boss chair him. Okay, boss chaired him. Nothing. Nothing went off. This went on for ages. I finished my nights. They were going and spinning him regularly. Never find it. Another thing cons would do to get rid of their phones would be swing them out the windows to the next cell. But K-Wing, you couldn't because they were enclosed in. There is no way he could have got the phone out of the cell. And they said, he must be winding you up. He must be on a joke. He must be standing in his window pretending he's on a phone, holding a can of beans or something. So this went on for weeks and weeks. And I said one morning, I said to Miss, I said, come on, we'll go down there. I said, we'll come in early. We'll take him by surprise because he's not expecting us to be there at like 5 a.m. We'll bust his door open. We'll spin his cell. So we did. We went in. We busted his door open. He's asleep. He jumps in. Right, we've got you now. So we searched him. We checked his cell, pillars, everything, ripped that cell to bits, nothing. And my mate, colleague, Mr. P, was like, I'm not having this. So this con has got all these matchstick models, like, because they'd make matchstick models as time passed. Like the Eiffel Tower and the Mona Lisa, not the Mona Lisa, what's the Taj Mahal, a motorbike. Someone had made a motorbike with a shotgun in the back, like Terminator's motorcycle. And he went like that and he just smacked all these things to smash them. And as he did, this box come flying off, smashed on the wall, phone dropped out. So this box was a solid cube. And it was like an ornamental thing. And when you picked it up, when we'd searched his cell, we'd picked it up. It's solid. You couldn't do anything with it. There was no drawers. There was nothing on it. When you shook it, there was nothing in it. What he was doing was every night, he was taking it to pieces, using the phone, putting it back in, like tightly packed in, gluing it back together like 2 hours before unlock. So it was solid. And that's it. It was there. Wow. And we were just looking at it going, because you wouldn't think, as a screw, your first thing is not to think, let's smash that box. If it's solid, it's solid. You just don't think that's how their mind would work.
Any other examples of crafty ways of doing things?
So we had a doctor. I don't think he's high profile, but it was weird. He was inside for like stealing 70 million off the NHS. He was he was getting B-catted. And I can't find any documentation about it. I remember talking to my wife about it, because my wife's NHS. I remember talking to my wife about it and saying, well, she's like, I never heard of that. And then when I went and you look for it, you can't find it, but it's true. He was there. I can remember his name, what he looked like, and he was getting B-catted, and we was going through all his belongings, searching it before he went off. And I picked up this tin of soup, Campbell's cream of mushroom tin soup, gave it a shake, could hear the soup inside, put it down. And he went, I'll tell you what, Mr. H, seeing I like you, I'll give you that one. And I was like, oh, no, I don't want your soup. You take it with you. He went, that's not soup. I went, well, what is it then? He went, have a look at it. So I picked up the tin. I'm looking at it. I'm like, it's soup, shaking it. I said, you're having me on, it's soup. He went, it's a sealed container with a phone in it. And I went, no, it's not. He went, pass it here. I passed it over, and he went like that. He got it like, and he squeezed like that. Bum! And he unpopped the lid, took the lid off, and it's an actual tin of Campbell's soup. You would never tell, purposefully made, and it had got a false inside, so it got liquid. You know, like them cups you get that when you tip them up, it looks like they've got liquid round. Yeah. So it got liquid inside it. So when you shook it, perfectly weighted, but in the middle, there was just big enough to sit a little small mobile phone. And he said, I've had that since I was, I think it was Brixton he was in when he first got arrested. He said, I've had that since I was in there, and a screw brought it in for me. He said, and I've been to 5 jails since that, and nobody's ever found it.
So did he get some kind of disciplinary action for that?
It was just a, let's just stick it in evidence. And he was going, it was as he was leaving the jail, did a lot of paperwork, a lot of discipline, just off you go. Next jail, we've now got another phone to our tally.
Wow.
I know, yeah.
So what about high profile prisoners or murderers?
So there was loads of murderers. There was a lifer wing, 60 people on there. Nobody high profile. You didn't really get high profile in Cat C. I wish I could tell you the story about Mark Morrison, the singer, but I can't. But by all accounts, when he did time, he was at Stocken, but that was for my time.
What had he done? I
don't know. I've never actually seen any. I mean, it might have just been an urban legend that other screws told us, but they used to say he was on H-Wing, and he paid all the other cons to let him win a ping pong tournament. So I didn't even know he'd been to prison, if I'm honest, and I might be talking out of turn. Mark Morrison, sorry if you haven't been to prison, but that's what the screws used to tell us. Yeah, they'd got him, and he didn't really get high profile. A lot of murderers.
So did you know any of the murderers' backstories?
I knew the crimes they'd committed. Yeah, I knew the crimes they'd committed. I knew we had a decent con. He was our cleaner on in the SEG. He was the SEG cleaner. Now, people talk about bringing back the death sentence. And there's advocates for it, there's arguments for and against, and they talk about murder. And before I went in the prison service, I was all for it. You know, you murder someone or you do this and you deserve it. But when you work with people like that, you start to realize what life is and how valuable life is. And this isn't taking anything away from this guy's crimes, but he murdered his girlfriend quite horrifically. And he was a normal guy. He had got a job. He got a business. He was really well spoken, a really nice bloke. Like if you had met him, you would have never have known that he'd ever done anything wrong.
Crime of passion.
Drug induced. Him and his girlfriend would go out and take loads of drugs, white powder. And he stabbed her, I think 37 times.
Because he was just too high.
So the story was, and he used to talk about it. He says, I remember doing it. He said, I remember doing it. I didn't want to. I loved her. I didn't want to, but I remember doing it. I don't know why I did, but I did. I did it.
Just because he was too high, I thought she cheated on him or something?
Yeah, and he said he doesn't know. He doesn't know why he did it. He remember being so angry and going and getting a knife and killing. He remembers it. But he was a really nice guy, and you think...
Maybe it was paranoia.
Yeah. And you think, well, where do you draw the line when you start talking about bringing back capital punishment? Because... when you're on nights, when you work nights, you deal with all the new inductions coming in. And that means the paperwork. And you got someone like him. He's murdered someone. It's not good. Can't go around murdering people. It's not right. I'm not justifying it. He's committed that crime. He's done 14, 15 years in prison. He's probably going to get released and live a normal life and be a normal bloke. Right? People coming in through visits into a Cat C jail, some of them are mid-20s and they've got 400 previous convictions. For violence, robberies, theft. It's always theft from elderly, theft from the disabled, theft from children. It's never theft from a bodybuilder in a gym. It's never theft. It's always vulnerable people. And it's vulnerable people's lives they're ruining.
What I've found from my research, because I've written a series of books about the war on drugs, the people who use the brown from Afghanistan... they cause mayhem in terms of acquisitive crime, especially preying on vulnerable people, old ladies, robbing their houses and shoplifting, burglaries, car theft. So I imagine that you see a lot of those people end up in the prison system.
Part of my issue with the prison service is that it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And I'm not saying I've got a formula to make it work, but these people you're talking about, they do that to feed the habit, and then they come into a prison, and then we stick them on a maintenance program, and they sit on a drug rehabilitation wing for 8, 9, 10 months of a 2-year sentence, because you only do half, you only spend half your time in prison. So if you get 2 years, you do 12 months. So they sit there, and we feed them substances, and then they get released, and they're not getting them substances anymore, and they go straight back onto the gear. And then they go and steal and rob to do it again. And it's just a revolving door.
But there's so much money made from those people because every prisoner's like £60,000 a year, isn't it?
Yeah.
Prison.
And one of my, and I don't think we really want to get into it too much, but one of my biggest issues is the money that people like the pharmaceutical companies make. Let's keep people sick. Let's keep people ill. There's so much money in that.
After the US military, which is the number one consumer of pharmaceuticals in America, prison system is the second biggest.
Yeah. It's
massive
rife.
Contracts.
Yeah. And that's why I would say, in my opinion, that's why they just keep this revolving door. And it's the same with, so my thing is fitness, health and fitness, the fitness hutch. We are pushing people to be ill. We are pushing sweets, chocolates, crisps, fast food. Let's keep people fat. Let's keep people inactive. Because when you do, you need medication to get better.
Yeah. All right. So going back to the prison then, like when you're dealing with the murderers, were there some murderers that you were wary of versus others who were well behaved?
No, I was never really wary of any of the murderers. I mean, you're wary of everyone. You're wary of everyone all the time. But when you're on, so it was B wing was the lifer wing. It was calm. It was always, they were well behaved because they knew what the consequences were. Most of them were coming up to the time when they could get released. And so if you, as a normal prisoner, if you get 2 years and you get released after 12 months, you're on license for 12 months. If you commit a crime during that time, or you get breached, or you don't go to one of your things, you get put back in prison and you finish your sentence. If you're a lifer, or this was how it was back then, I don't know if it still is now, if you was a lifer and you got released, you're on lifetime license. And if you commit one crime, 10 years. So they've got the incentive. They've got the incentive there to behave. It wasn't them that you're wary of. It's all the others that you're wary of, watching your back all the time. Even the ones that you get on with, even the ones that have given you intel, because they've got nothing to lose.
Did anyone turn on you?
Yeah, oh yeah, I was assaulted once. I like to think I was a good screw. There were screws that weren't good. There were screws that would overstep the mark. Maybe they'd been in too long. There was restraints that probably could have been avoided. But you can always justify a restraint with reasonable, necessary, proportionate. I was in fear for my safety. So this one day I was in the SEG, and there's a guy, just call him prisoner. The prisoner. I can't think of a name. The problem was this went to court, so I've got his name etched on my brain. I don't want to splurt it out by accident. No. So we'll just call him prisoner. And he had mental health issues. He would just stand staring. I gone out. And he was a big black guy. And he was being adjudicated. I can't remember what the adjudication was for, if I'm honest, but I'd been in the block a long time. I was leading the adjudication. I walked him into the adjudication room, said, stand behind the chair and give your name and number to the governor. And he just stood still, didn't move. I said, stand behind the chair, give your name and number to the governor. And he just turned around, looked at me and went, bosh! Just smacked me clean in the face. Ooh. And you can see it on camera, bosh. And I take 2 steps back, and then I kind of do the Scooby-Doo thing. Like, I ran on the spot and then ran in to go and restrain him. And the table in the adjudication room went flying because the governor was a big guy. He launched the table. The other screw that was in there with me, but they were all big guys. Everyone was a big guy. He was a big guy. So we jumped on him and restrained him. I've got blood prissing out my nose. And yeah, and then so they restrained him. And I had to go x-rays and stuff. But it wasn't too bad, actually. Nothing was broken. Initially they thought he broke my nose on my cheekbone, but it was just severely bruised. But that was it. Other than that, I was never potted. I was never assaulted. I've been in probably one other situation where I thought, I'm in the pooper here.
What was that?
So on the old wings, the smaller wings, the spurs... the corridors that the cells are on, you go down the bottom of them and there's no way out. Once you're at the bottom, you've got to go back up. But you know, like on, was it in Porridge where they went down and you couldn't get out at the bottom. And I remember I was on a wing and a con had come on the wing that shouldn't have been on the wing. And I knew who he was. I knew he shouldn't have been on the wing. Somebody let him on, like a new screw had let him on because he just said it was his wing. Knocked on the door, opened it, just walked on. So I followed him down. I saw him come past the office. I followed him down to the bottom. And I said, can you give me your name and number, please? And he told me to F off, basically. And I'm stood on the wing. And I said, well, I know your name. He was a football hooligan. I says, I know your name, I know your heart, I know this isn't your wing. And he's like, no, that's not me, that's not me. I said, yeah, that's you, that's definitely you. So you need to leave, and what are you going to do if I don't? I said, well, if you don't, then I'm going to escort you off. He went, yeah, but you won't be able to. I'm thinking, I won't be able to. Like, not on my own, because you're a lump. And like at this point, I wasn't into fighting one-on-one. I liked 3-on-1. It was much fairer. So I'm stood there going, okay. I said, that's fine, but I'm going to go and I'm going to fetch some people and then we're going to come and we're going to remove you. And he went, how exactly are you going to do that? And I went, oh, what do you mean? He went, look behind you. And I turned around and I've obviously walked down a corridor with 10 cells and every single con had come out and there was 4 or 5 cons stood between me and the only exit. And he said, all these cons know who I am. As if to say, you ain't getting past. And I was like, okay. He went, so what are you going to do now then, big man? Like that. Didn't have a radio. So radio was staff assistants. I hadn't picked a radio up this morning. Not everyone got a radio. So I'm stood there. And I'm going to be honest, I was bricking it at this point. I thought, I'm in this here. And then it dawned on me. There's an alarm bell just next to me on the wall. And I just went, I'm going to do this. Bang. Tap the alarm bell. Oh, and he was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And then obviously I couldn't have a radio, but then everyone else in the jail would have got alarm bell, spur 2, it was E-wing, alarm bell, spur 2, E-wing. So I'm stood there, and he went, "Oh, you think you're a big man? You need your friends, do you?" And I'm thinking, I hope they get here before he lumps me, because I thought it's going to take them a good couple of minutes to get down here. And like, but at that point, all the other cons dispersed, and I started to, I'm like backing away from him. I'm not going to go too quick because I don't want to think I'm running. But I started to back, and as I did, these screws come on, and then he just switched. He went, "Don't know what he's done that for." I said, he's not supposed to be here. I've asked him to leave. And I told him I'd leave, and he just hit that bell for no reason. But obviously your colleagues know that you wouldn't do that. But I was like, but then I didn't get filled in, but I got gripped by the other seg screws. One of them got hold of me and said, "If you ever do that again." And I was like, what? I thought he was going to say, put myself in a situation where I'm going to get hurt. He went, "Hit an alarm bell to take the pussy way out." He said, "You should have restrained him." And I was like, no. Wow. Because that's what it was. You couldn't be a weakling. You couldn't be sick. You could never go sick. If you were sick, you came into work. If you were hurt, you came into work. No matter what, you came in. There was no mental illness. You couldn't suffer from depression or anxiety. You just get beaten up. And that was the other screws, because they were big. Ooh, we're men. Can't eat. What do you mean you can't eat 15 sausages? Real men can eat 50 of that. And it was that kind of thing.
What was your scariest moment throughout the whole career in the prison?
Oh man, scariest moment. Okay, so I think it's got to be the riot. The indiscipline. I think that was a pretty scary moment, because I mean, as I'm getting into the flow of talking, I think about it, and you think about when you get down there. There is people everywhere. There's two people fighting over there. There's someone with a pool cue over there. You're stood in the middle of the wing. You've got people up above you that could have hot water thrown down on you. And I know that we were minutes away from that being a riot. And when there was a riot, and this was after I left the prison, when there was a riot at HMP Stocken, it was K-Wing that they lost. That was the wing. Because everybody's off their heads. Everyone's on the white stuff, the brown stuff, the green stuff. There's no... And I remember being down there thinking, this is bad. This is bad.
So the one that you dodged, how bad did that one get?
You
said there was one after you left.
Oh, they trashed the wing.
Yeah.
They trashed the wing. I don't know the full extent, but I was talking to one of my friends who's still in, and he said they lost the wing. It's trashed. There's no one in it. They've trashed it to the point it's gone. And that's what can happen. When Ashwell, when the one next door rioted, that was the end of the jail. Ashwell never opened again. They got to the point where they trashed an entire jail, the whole prison.
So in the riot that you were in then, you said threats can come at you from any direction. How, does your awareness change?
Threats can come at you in any direction all the time. And certain things become instinctive when you're a prison officer. Your keys are always a risk, because if you lose your keys, someone gets your keys and then get out. You've always got to have them somewhere. You go, every door you go through, it's habit to open it, go through it, lock it, and what's called prove it, give it a shake. That becomes second nature just to do that. You don't think, I need to prove that door. One thing that becomes second nature is when you're on them landings that have got the old style Victorian, what you're seeing, Bad Girls and that, where there's people up above and they can throw things down. It becomes instinctive to walk under the landing above you. You don't walk down the middle, because if you walk down the middle, you're leaving yourself open to things being lobbed at you. So you are always thinking about your surroundings. One of the real, I won't say scary things, but one of the biggest things you've got to consider is, soon as the roll is done, soon as unlock is called, you go unlock every prisoner. They're all going to work. They're all going all over the place. So all the wings doors open, and there is cons everywhere. And HMP Stocken at one point had 1,000 prisoners, and probably 3/4 of them are on the corridors. So if you're walking down that corridor on your own, you are just surrounded by prisoners. And that in itself is pretty hairy. I'll be honest.
Did you have a sense that your keys were getting targeted?
Never thought that in my whole time. And I don't think prisoners would be stupid enough. You keep them in a pouch on your side. But they say, if you're holding them, you hide them, because prisoners would see your keys. Some of them are savvy, they're clever. They could see your key, draw your key from memory.
Wow.
Yeah, so hide your keys, don't let anyone see them. Never compromised.
Did you ever sense you were getting played in any other ways?
Oh, all the time.
What were the main ones?
I would say the biggest one, I did a lot of time working in the mandatory drug testing unit. You do the course to become a drug tester. So you might come in, your job might be the seg, but you might come in and look at the rota and they'll say, you're rota to drug test today. And the things that cons will do to get out of a drug test, to not fail a drug test, and they're all the time trying to play you. And I remember this one situation, we'd searched this guy and I was still a rookie. And before you do a drug test, you search them, top half, bottom half, got to make sure they've got nothing strapped, because they will strap, like they'll get fingers of gloves and fill them with someone else's pee, and then when they go to pee, they'll just use the glove. So you've got to try and find them. So you search them, and I remember searching this con, and it's not the prettiest thing to do, but this is what you have to do. You never have somebody completely naked. There was a documentary or a TV program a few years ago where it depicted screws strip searching cons naked. You don't naked strip search.
Does in America.
Does it really?
Yeah, they even had the finger wave in America. God. But that got ruled unconstitutional, whereby they put on the rubber gloves and finger went in.
There's none of that. In a UK prison, it's top half off. Search the top half, arms up, spin round, top half back on, bottom half off, but then they lift up and turn round. There's no bending over. But if you suspect they've got something plugged, you can get them to face you, but squat down. Because if you're in a full squat position, it's really hard to clench something. They tend, and I've seen the stuff pop out when they do that. So this con, we've got him down the MDT. We had searched his top half, back on, bottom half off. Spin around, do a full 360. He turned around. He's got, Sterodent tablets for false teeth. He's got one of them tubes, like a Sterodent tablet tubes, between his bum cheeks. Like not plugged, just clenching it. And I saw it when it's around. And he went to put your bottoms on. I went, don't go dress yet. I need that, what you've got there. He went, I ain't got anything. I said, you have? I've just seen it. No. I said, turn around again. He went, no, I've turned around once. I'm not doing it again. I don't have to. Now, at that point within the prison service, I am well within my legal rights to restrain that prisoner because he is failing to comply. So I can restrain him and search him under restraint. However, I was a rookie, had never put hands on myself, like instigated. And I think in my whole career, I instigated 2 restraints. I'd never instigated a restraint, didn't really want to. I was with another young officer. So I made a mistake. I put him back in a cell, put him back in the holding cell, and went and called and said, we've got this guy down here, he's refusing this, we think he's got something, well, we know he has, I've seen it, can we get an officer down here? They come down, went, searched him again, gone. Went and looked out the window of the cell, it's outside. Couldn't prove, and to this day I think, putting him back in that cell was a huge mistake. Like, I could have just restrained him. And then, so when people say to me about, oh, you shouldn't restrain all the time, I think there was times when we should have done and perhaps didn't.
Do you think he had substances in that package then?
No, he would have had urine.
Oh, fake urine.
He would have had urine.
Someone else's urine that was clean.
Yeah, he would have had someone else's urine that was clean.
It, yeah.
And so, I tell you this. So, when in the prison service, when you break rules, they have to be really careful how they word the charge that they give. So, unauthorized article, right? So, it used to be an unauthorized article. If I had got him and adjudicated and said he was in possession of an unauthorized article, the parasite or the solicitor that would come in would say, where did he get it from? Where did he get what from? The Sterodent tablet tube. Well, he bought it on Canteen. It's not unauthorized then. You sold him it. It's not an authorized article. So they changed the wording to has in his possession an article that isn't being used for what it is intended use. So when you adjudicate within the prison, it's a governor. But when it's a more serious charge, failing a drug test, serious assault, something like that, a judge comes in. So once a month, a judge comes in and they can get added days to their sentence. I think it's up to 28 days per charge. So we've got this con and he was in has in possession an article, not what it was tended. What it was because it was an MDT, he had got a toothpaste tube that was filled with wee. So it wasn't being toothpaste tubes, wasn't being used for toothpaste. So we sat there, and these judges were brilliant. Judges hated the cons, and we sat there on this this adjudication, and the judge read it out, and the the solicitor says, "How do you know that what's in that tube isn't toothpaste?" And the judge sat and looked at me. They had a long day of solicitors trying to get cons off these like charges that they were obviously guilty for. And the judge went, "Do you know what?" He says, "I've had enough of this." And he got the evidence bag, he ripped it open, and he squirted the pee out onto the table in front of the solicitor and went, "Would you brush your teeth with that?" And the solicitor was like, he just didn't know what to say. But them adjudication days, they were just like that. Solicitors coming in, trying to get people off with charges that they were guilty for. It was... So another one, we had a con who was refusing to leave the segregation unit. And that was a charge in itself. Refusing to leave the seg and go back to general population. And he got 3 charges of this. And a judge come in, and he'd been saying to us he was a brummie. And he was in for stealing a mobile phone off a 14-year-old girl. That was he'd beat her up and stole her phone. Yeah, big man. And he would get a big man ting in it. That's what he'd say. "I'm a big man ting, big man on road." It's like, you're not. You're a loser. You're a nobody. And... so he wouldn't go on the wing because he was going to get killed. They were going to beat him up. So, and he kept saying, "I'll get off with it. My dad's a solicitor and he's going to send one of his paralegals and I'm going to get away with this." And he was always bigging himself up. And we went into this adjudication room, and I wish I could do this standing up, but I can't. So he walks in and he sits down, and I sit behind him. I've got my foot on the chair. So he's sat here. I'm sat to his right. My colleague is sat to his left with the door behind him. And his solicitor comes in and could barely even speak a word of English. He was a little Asian paralegal, clearly didn't have a clue. Judge read out all the adjudication, and he went, "Solicitor, do you want to say anything?" No. This con looked at him. He didn't say no. Like, right, guilty. 72 added days. So whatever, 28 times 3 years. I think it might be 72. So 28, 3 lots of 28. So this con. So I moved my foot off his chair so he could stand up. He stood up, pointed to his solicitor. He's probably went, "You're sacked." And as he did, my colleague opened the door to the adjudication room. He turned round to walk out. Bosh! Straight into the door. Knocked himself out cold.
Oh.
Worst day for his adjudication ever.
So as you've brought up the subject of P tests, in America, I don't know if they do it like this in the UK, but there's a staff member watching you get your man part out and urinate in the thing. So he's gazing at your man part as this. But the pressure of trying to pee when a staff member is gazing, they call it Peter gazing in America, is Peter gazing on your man part. A lot of people can't pee under that pressure, but that's an automatic dirty if you can't pee, so you get the ticket. Which is even more pressure. How does it work in the UK?
So you don't look directly at them. That's how they can get away with using like something else. You observe, you stand near, but you don't actually look at the man parts.
So you don't look directly at them. Were you looking?
You can't. Well, they've got their back to you.
Oh, they've got the back to you.
Yeah.
So in America, you're peeing and he's stood there checking you directly out.
Oh, no, it's not. I don't know what it's like now, but this would be, there's a mirror up on a wall in the corner, and there's like a little, there's a urinal, so they can actually pee in a urinal if they've got loads to come. So it's just like being in a public toilet, and they're stood at a urinal, and then they hold the pot. The mirror can kind of see if they're fiddling with anything, but doesn't actually see their parts. But it's the same. But the same thing, what they call it, something shy. I can't remember what the term was now, but that's what it would be. And if they couldn't go, that was a fail, because they could have now legally, according to the World Health Organization, there's a certain amount of fluid you can drink in a certain amount of time. If you drink it in that amount of time and still can't go, then you're refusing to go, because there's no way you would drink that much and not be able to go.
Yeah, if the guard was nice, he'd say, "Go and drink a load of stuff and we'll call you in an hour or 2 hours," something like that.
The trouble is, we're going drinking loads of stuff, it waters it down, and then it doesn't come back as a fail, it comes back as a dilute.
Right.
And then that's a different charge then, a dilute. You can't charge someone for having dilute urine, because they might be someone that goes to the drink and drink. If I went and did a pee test now, I'd be dilute because I drink loads.
And this is why I'm told that people converted in prison from the green to the brown, because the green stays in your urine for a month, but the brown doesn't. And then other substances, such as spice, it took them a long time to catch up with that in the urine completely. So that was encouraged.
So spice and psychoactive substances weren't a thing when I was in. That really started later on.
Okay.
But if we're talking about green, are we talking about the herbal green that you roll up? Yeah, that's exactly why. That's exactly why they go from green to brown, because the amount of time it stays in your system.
Yeah.
It's tragic, really. So by putting in drug tests, you're actually converting people to Class A drugs.
Substance.
Yeah.
Sad, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what about educational resources in the UK system? Did they have programs and stuff?
Really good programs. Within our jail, you could do VT, so it's vocational training. So they had VT catering, so you could learn to be a chef. They had VT tires and exhaust, so you could learn to work in like Quick Fit. They had like computer courses, English, math. I mean, what you can achieve in the prison service to better yourself is phenomenal.
And so it should be, because they want them to be, model citizens when they get out. Because in America, there's nothing. It's just drug and gang infested mayhem.
Yeah.
But they know when they come back, $60,000. Hey, why educate them if they get jobs?
I think the problem with the prison service in the UK, and again, I did touch on this earlier, is it's ineffective, and they try and model it sometimes on the American models. And I think Ricky would probably have to tell you more about IPP than I can, but I'm pretty sure that the IPP system was something they trialed in America and they brought it to the UK but didn't run it the same, and it was a terrible system. But you think you've got a con who on the outside is homeless or lives in squalor, is earning benefits, doesn't have a job, has no street cred, has got nothing. You come to prison, you get free clothes, free shoes, free food, free meds, free gym, free training, free TV. Like, you're warm, you're safe. What's better?
It's like that guy in Shawshank, isn't it? Institutionalized.
Yeah, institutionalized.
He wants to come back.
All their friends are there. Like, they all know each other.
Made a name for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how, I don't know what the answer is. I don't know how to prevent crime. I don't think that we are tough enough. I think we've got to the point where
we're not tough enough on the adults who harm kids and the adults who force themselves on women, especially.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's something that, and I believe, in my opinion, that's because that's the crime of choice of the more famous people.
Oh, indeed. It's prevalent, isn't it, in the elites? So one of the talking points we've got here is the problem with governors.
So, governors. I know you've had a governor on, and not all governors were like this. So I've had loads of problems with governors. And one of my biggest issues is people who have double standards. And I can openly tell you, I knew of a governor who manufactured a restraint against a prisoner because he wanted him to be punished for spitting at a female member of staff, which is disgusting. And cons kind of knew if they overstepped the line that at some point a restraint would happen. But for a governor to ring up a segregation unit and say, I'm going to be adjudicating this morning, during adjudications, can you make sure that the prisoner in this cell becomes refractory so we can restrain him because I want to come and be involved in the restraint because he spat in someone's face who this governor was having an affair with. Now,
he spat in someone's face that the governor was having an affair with.
Yeah.
So the governor was a man having an affair with a female staff member.
Yeah.
Got it.
And then that restraint happened. Like, I wasn't actually there, but I know the con. I knew who he was and why they had done it. And, each their own, whatever you want to do. But then don't be the governor that's then, when I go and restrain someone, comes to me and says, why have you done that restraint? Did you follow the book? Did you do this? Did you do that? And I'm sat there thinking, when you was a sprog, when you was a young screw at Leicester, the stories were you was bringing in phones and drugs. That was the rumours. I don't know for definite that's what this governor was doing, but that's what everyone said. They know that this governor was doing that because there was a con that come in and said, God, you got him here. He was only a principal officer there and he was doing all sorts. And then he's manufacturing assaults. And then they're coming to us and going, why did you put hands on that prisoner? Why didn't you just shut the door? Why did you do this? Questioned all the time. And that was because towards the end of my career, I was earning £30,000 a year. I was at top band, or 20, it might have been 28. It was going on 30, I can't remember the exact amount. But they were recruiting new recruits at 15 and a half. So if they could get me sacked, if I could go, then they could replace me for half the price. So that's what they wanted. And we had a screw. I'm going to tell this story. We had a screw. I'm not going to say his name, but he had been in a long time, and he was a good screw, but he had crossed the line more than once. He was misogynistic. He was rude. He was racist. He was everything that everybody would hate. He did what he needed to do as a screw, but he wasn't a decent bloke. Governors hated him. There'd been loads of complaints about him, but no one could ever prove anything. And they started a witch hunt to get him out. This governor did. Fairly new governor, young female. Well, she wasn't even young. Female governor. And she come to me and she says, "You worked loads of shifts with this officer, didn't you?" I said, "Yeah, I've worked loads with him." She said, "Have you ever heard of any stories about things that he does that he shouldn't do?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't really know what you mean, Governor." She went, "Well, we're putting a case together and we're looking for people to testify that he's done this and he's done that." And I went, Yeah, actually, it's disgusting, some of the stuff he's done, Governor. And this wasn't even on the wing, by the way. I was at home at this point. I was off sick. So I'd had back surgery, had 9 weeks off after having surgery. And this was a telephone call. Says, "Would you testify under oath to these incidents?" I was like, "Yeah, of course I would. Yeah. So it's a witch hunt. They're just looking for people." So knock at the door, police turn up, recording equipment, sit down. Okay, so we've got the list of incidents here. On such and such a day, Officer Thingy apparently assaulted a prisoner by punching him in the face. Can you tell me your recollection of that story? "No, I don't recall that story, officer." He went, "What?" He looked at it. "You don't recall that?" "No, I don't recall that." "Okay, so have you ever heard Officer such and such call an officer an N-word?" "Nope, don't recall that one either." And had a whole list of these things that they were trying to get him for, which he hadn't done, to be fair. And then this governor rang me up afterwards and she went, "You said that you was going to do this." I said, "Oh, sorry, Governor, I think I misunderstood what you meant." They sacked him. They sacked him anyway, and then had to overturn it because it had been manufactured. Now, if they had just got him for what he had done wrong, but they couldn't prove it. And from my understanding, I don't know, this happened after I left, from my understanding, they overturned it and then had to give him a massive payout. He was 2 years from full retirement when they tried to sack him, which would have meant a massive pension. And I think, from what I was told, that not only did he get his massive pension, they had to pay him for the rest of his career as well. Wow. Until he retired.
Wow.
And that's what governors were like towards the end. And I know that when you spoke to
Vanessa,
the other guy, the guy with the beard,
John Sutton.
John Sutton, yeah. I know when you spoke to John, he spoke briefly about the POA. Now, the POA I have a huge problem with, and they are in with the governors. They ran things for their own. In my opinion, they ran things for their own gains. And it was always about, everything they ever talked about was about pensions, because they were all old school, all old sweats. All they gave a damn about was their pensions. They didn't care about working conditions. They didn't care about how many people were on the wing, long hours or anything like that. They cared about pensions. And I was working down on a wing I didn't want to be on, and it was about 1.5 miles away from the gate. I think it's about a 15-minute walk from the wing to the gate. So every day that's half an hour extra you had to do, because they said you have to be there. So I got to the point where I said, "You know what? Soon as my numbers are in, once I've counted my spur and I'm happy that my spur is correct, I'm heading to the gate. I don't care if A wing are correct or B wing are correct. I know my spur's correct, so I can get to the gate for when the roll is correct, I can leave." Because they were saying, "No, you have to wait for everybody to be correct before you can leave your wing." And I'm going, well, like, it could be 10 minutes late in and I've got a 15-minute walk. So I think that's 25 minutes late off. I'm not prepared to do it. So I started leaving. And the duty governor, he actually was a PO, who was, I can't remember what they called him, the duty manager, was at the gate when I got there on one of the days, and he said, what wing were you on, Elwin? You can't be a usual. And I walked away from him, and he chased me out. He chased me out into the car park. And I said, just so you know, I'm a civilian right now. I'm out the prison. I'm a civilian. Don't talk to me like I'm a piece of shit. Go yourself. So I got in my car, I drove off. Come back in the next day, they demanded a meeting with me. With the POA present, they demanded a meeting with me to discuss my behaviour and the way that I'd spoke to this manager. I wanted the POA present, so I want my union there because I'm paying for the union. So I sat and I told them exactly what I thought of their rules, of the way that they treated officers, the way that they spoke to people. I had a disciplinary against me because I had a mohawk, so I shaved. It was more like a mullet than a mohawk. It was when Chelsea won the Champions League. I shaved my hair and I dyed it blue, and they hated it, and they accused me of being a thug. So I had to change. So I had a disciplinary against me for that, and there'd just been all this stuff where they were trying to either get me to quit or trying to get me to the point where I got sacked. So I just bawled it all out in this meeting. I said, this is going on, that's going on, I've had enough of this. This governor said this to me, and it all come out. And I left it at that, and I went back to the wing. And this was in the morning. And in the afternoon, another screw come in, and he said, you're an idiot, you are. And I said, what? And this is a screw that I knew well, like a friend. He says, you're going to ruin it for everyone, moaning and complaining. And I said, what are you on about? He said, I wish we could say names. This POA member or this POA representative has just been telling everyone in the car park what you said in your meeting this morning. And I said, you what? This is a private confidential meeting. Well, he's just been telling everyone what you said. You're going to ruin it for everyone. I thought, you know what? At this point, I had it to hear. So I sat down at a computer and I did a global email to everyone in the prison, so everyone in the prison, all the civvy staff, all the governors, and I said, just to let you know, this is who your POA representative is. It's such and such. I had this conversation, and I had this, and I said this, and he went out in the car park and he told everyone about this confidential meeting. By the way, I won't be back. Bye.
What? Sent
that email to everyone, including the number one governor. Walked out the prison, never went back. Went home. Said to myself, I'm done with it. My mental health it's too precious to be, I'm watching my back with murderers and arists and all them, and the people who are stabbing me in the back are supposed to be my colleagues. I'm not going back, and I didn't.
What year was that?
2012.
So how long had you been in the service?
That would have been 7 years.
Did you feel a relief?
Yeah, massive, huge. It was like a whole way. I broke down in tears when I walked in the door. I said, I cannot do it anymore. I'd had back surgery. At this point, I'd had 2 kids. And when I had my first child, I went onto a work-life balance. So I had certain days off so I could look after my kids. And when the second one come along, my wife had been on maternity leave, so I didn't need my work-life balance. And then when I went to get it again, they said, no, you can't have it. No reason. All they had to do was offer it. I said, what's the reason? You just can't have it. It doesn't fit with the business needs of the establishment. I said, well, it has done for the last 2 years. Well, I've been off with my son. Nope, you can't have it. You've got to work the shifts you're working. And it was just a tactic to try and get me to resign. So I had just had it. Now, there was things that had happened during that time with the work-life balance where I'd had emails. I had an email saying you can't have it because you can't have, when it was Wednesday, I think it was I wanted Wednesdays off. You can't have Wednesdays off because it doesn't fit with the establishment. And I was working on the wing with a girl at the time who had just come back from maternity leave, and she had put in a work-life balance as well. And I sent her an email and said, have you put in your work-life balance yet? No, I haven't, because I knew she wanted Wednesdays off, because I knew her husband who worked on it. I said, okay, then that's fine. So I put mine in. So I know mine went in before hers, right? And it's a bit petty, but I know mine had gone in before hers. She got hers and got Wednesdays off. And she was a young officer that wasn't getting paid very much. So then I said to my friend, a guy who was my friend, he was a senior officer, and I said, I've got an email from her that proves that I put mine in before her, which proves inequality. You've given a female it, but not me. And if you're going to preach equality, you've got to be equal. That friend turned on me. That friend then told everybody that I had an email that I could go in and get. And they refused me. I rang up and said, I want to come in. I want to come get all my stuff. Still had stuff in my locker. They said, at the gate, they said, so I went to the prison. I didn't ring up, sorry. I went to the prison, said, I want to come and get my stuff. And my picture was in the gate. Corrupt officer, don't let him in. Don't let him in. He's banned from the jail.
How did that feel?
I can't, I'm getting emotional thinking about it. I was broken at this point. I was broken emotionally. I was unemployed with 2 young kids. They had absolutely broke me. I think I had 7 grievances outstanding at this point against number 1 governor, against the said governor. There was 4 governors I got 7 grievances out against, and they escorted me like a piece of trash. They wouldn't let me go on any computers. I wasn't to access any of the systems, so I couldn't go get the emails off that I wanted. They escorted me to where my locker was, got my stuff, and escorted me back to the gate like I was one of the cons.
What were all these grievances against governors?
So I had grievance against the number 1 governor because of the. So the grievance against the number 1 governor was because of the work-life balance. The grievance I had got against another governor was because of the mohawk and the. So what they did was they accused me of testosterone-fueled macho bravado. I don't even know what that means, and looking like a thug because I'd got a mohawk. And I had said, so I was being a bit of a dick. I'd said, well, that's not inclusive. Talk about being inclusive. That's not inclusive. There was a girl on our wing that had got pink hair. I said, how come she can have pink hair, but I can't have blue hair? Like, what? Where does... So that was that grievance. There was one against... I can't remember the governor's name. I can remember his name. Little short thing. And I had a grievance against him, but I can't remember what it was for. Do you know what? I've got a feeling it was because of the... I raised it afterwards because he was the governor that had instigated the banning me from the wing. Because I'd said, look, defamation of character. You've put that on there. My friends still work in this prison. They see my picture on here saying I'm corrupt. What does that look like? So I got all these grievances. Some of them were really petty. I'm not saying I was 100% right in this. I think it takes a real big man to say when you're wrong. I was being petty, but I was being petty because they were being petty. I was being petty because, one of them was the governor that was managing the POA guy. That was about he was the governor that I'd sat in the meeting with for having a go at someone. So I'd taken one out against him for sharing information when he shouldn't have done. I was being petty, but I was angry and I was upset. But you know what? They never went anywhere. It just all got forgotten. I went to a different jail for them to be heard, and it went up to the Under Minister for Justice was dealing with it, and they just denied everything that had happened. They denied it. I couldn't prove it. Couldn't get any of the emails. I requested all my emails through the Freedom of Information, which you can do. Every email I'd ever sent and received while I'd been in the prison service, and had them delivered to me in big parcels, thousands of them. And I remember sitting down, and I started working in residential children's homes at this point. I was loving that job, and I said to my wife, I don't need this anymore. I just need to let it go. It's been a year, I think it was, down the line. I just need to let this go. So I've still got the emails. I've got them in. I'm not going to say where in case they try and get them. I've got the emails still. So yeah, it was, but it still went on after that. During that time, so this was actually another grievance. I remember what the other grievance was for now. During that time, I'd applied for another job. I'd put the prison down as references. The number 1 governor, who had already got one grievance out against, responded to the company that I was applying for and said he'd never heard of me. Never heard of him. They said, we've spoke to Governor such and such. He said he's never heard of you. I said, well, that's funny because I was at a meeting last week with him where I was having a grievance against him, but he'd never heard of me. They ended up having to go to joint the head MOJ headquarters to get my records because the prison wouldn't even talk about it.
So what advice do you give to people who are thinking about joining the prison service?
Now, I don't know. I seriously don't know. I would say don't. If I'm honest, I would say don't. I think it's very dangerous. I've got friends that are still in who have moved on to different areas and they're like, oh, I don't have... Nearly every time I speak to an old friend who's still in the prison service, the first thing they say is, don't really have prisoner contact now, or I'm in the gym and I see the best cons, or I work in this office, and it's really dangerous. And the money that they're paying is terrible.
Because Vanessa said all the experienced officers, when Cameron came in, they sacked them all, brought in the cheap young ones who've got no experience, which made it way more dangerous.
Absolutely. That's what they did. People took VEDS, which was the voluntary retirement, which was a huge payout if you had done a decent amount of time. So the ones that took the VEDS were fine. The ones that didn't, then they pushed them and bullied them until they left or tried to get them sacked.
Wow.
Shocking, isn't it?
What made you start a YouTube channel?
How long you got? So during I like my gym, I like my fitness, I like my health stuff. And during lockdown, I built my own gym. Going back to, I trained
Built your own gym? How'd you do that?
I just had a building erected in my back garden, like a summer house type thing.
Wow!
Bought a load of equipment on the Never 0% finance.
Wow!
Kitted the gym out, and I started training for myself. And I realised that I could help people. I like helping people anyway. Helping people's my thing. One of the reasons I come out of the prison service, I suppose, I think psychologically you realise you're not helping anyone. You just revolving door. Whereas if you come out, you can do a job where you can really help people. So I started advertising that I would do online or face-to-face fitness. One of my friends who has a YouTube channel, Frugal Stew.
Shout out to Stew.
Yeah, Stewie, man. He wanted me to do some videos. And I said, I don't know how to WhatsApp videos and stuff. It's hard work. He said, well, just create a YouTube channel and upload them as a unlisted and then send me the link and I can just watch them on there. And that's where it started. Just doing that, and it grew from there.
Do you put any of your prison officer stories up anywhere?
I haven't. I've never really told. I don't really know what. A bit late now. I don't really know what I can and can't say, because you think when you start talking, there's people that I know that are still in, and I don't want to give anyone a bad name, because I'll be honest, there is some very, very good prison officers, and I've still got some friends who are good friends who still do the job, and they were to the letter. So I don't want the stories. People want to hear the rubbish stories. People want to hear the dirty stories, the ones that you're saying, tell these. As a job, for the majority of my time in the prison service, it was amazing. I met some good people, but I will say that the ones who I'm still friends with now are 2 or 3 that I stay in contact with. Other than that, I just lost contact with everyone because the majority of them were just no good.
And I saw you on Ricky Colleen's channel, so huge thank you to Ricky Colleen for organising this interview, and people check out his channel. There's a few things we mentioned. We mentioned Vanessa, so the prison governor. Check out that podcast on this channel. Holly, we've done 3 or 4 with Holly, prison governor. Really hard hitting, both Vanessa and Holly, fantastic storytellers. Tell the viewers what your channel is called. So my channel is called The Fitness Hutch. We do health and fitness, well-being, mental health. We have the mental health nurse on board. We do regular live podcasts, and we do a lot of mindset stuff as well. So yeah, The Fitness Hutch. All of Paul's links will be in the description box. Are you available on socials for people to contact? I am, yeah. I have TikTok. I don't really know much about it. I think you have to look for Paul Hutchinson on TikTok, because they wouldn't let me have The Fitness Hutch. I don't know why. Instagram, I'm The Fitness Hutch, and Facebook, I'm The Fitness Hutch. So yeah, and we mentioned John Sutton as well. The Masonic palm ticklers officers tried to kill him during his job. Check out that podcast we did. And he's also got a free book series out about that. My dad's read it, I've read it. It's mind-blowing. Check out John Sutton's books as well. Huge thank you for joining us today. Huge thank you for Joe and James coming out and filming these. And much love and respect wherever you are in the world. Let us know in the comments what you think about this podcast. And thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you next time. And most of all, huge thank you to Paul for coming out, man. Thank you very much for having me. No, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you. Give us a hug, brother. Yes. Cheers. Nice one, well done. I enjoyed that. Yeah. Congratulations to our podcast, John Sutton, whose book, HMP Manchester Prison Officer, is now available worldwide. We've done a podcast with John, and what he went through with the Freemason prison officers working against him, putting his life on the line, is mind-boggling. So the subtitle is, I survived terrorists, murderers, rapists, and Freemason officer attacks in strange ways and wormwood scrubs. John G. Sutton.
So this book includes drugs, riot shanks, dirty protests, violent Freemason guards, self-mutilation and suicides. Welcome to the brutal truth about life as a prison officer. So with a career spanning 10 years inside of the walls of Britain's most infamous prisons, Manchester's Strangeways and London's Wormwood Scrubs, John Sutton has experienced it all. Attacked by the Soho vampire and insane killer, assaulted by the Cambridge rapist, threatened by the IRA, beaten, persecuted and prosecuted by Freemason officers. John Sutton survived to reveal the hard-hitting truth in this jaw-dropping memoir.
From the get-go, he just takes you right inside into a conflict, and you just cannot put the book down all the way through. If you've ever wondered what a career in the prison service is really like, then this searingly honest account will take you onto the landings housing Britain's most dangerous prisoners. Accompany John as he carries the keys that lock up murderers, rapists, gangsters, paedophiles, terrorists, addicts, and the mentally ill. As well as the ever-present threat from the inmates, John had to endure a conspiracy of violence from his own colleagues who were Freemasons. Nothing can be more dangerous in prison than the staff not having your back. Horrifying, harrowing, and humorous, John's book will take you on an unforgettable journey into a netherworld of drugs, violence, and hostile Freemasons. It's even got the Masonic compass symbol on the cover. So check it out, available worldwide. John Sutton's book, HMP Manchester Prison Officer. It's an ebook, paperback, and audiobook.
I kill you! Yeah! A knife and a kosh and all that, like, yeah! And he's looking at me, and we went white, and then he was gone, like.
What is it about a tough guy that fascinates us?
Imagine I'm hearing that, I'm thinking I'm not going down today. If I go down today, I'm dead.
We're bringing you the very best of our interviews with Britain's hardest men.
They made the mistake of bringing billy clubs, iron bars and knives to a gunfight.
No Rules Fighter Bash, Stephen the Devil French, and my best friend, Wild Man. Over 2 hours of terrifying tales of punch-ups, stabbings.
That's what happens in that world. You leave people long enough, they get enough rope to hang themselves.
Attempted murders and exceptional all-round hardness. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. I've got some exciting news to announce. Michael Franzese is coming back to tour the UK in 2024. The Remade Man Tour, the Michael Franzese story. Michael Franzese, once named one of the 50 most significant mob bosses in the USA by Fortune magazine, and a former member of the notorious Colombo crime family, will take you deep into the world of organised crime, sharing captivating tales and insights into the mafia's past, present and future. Join us for an unforgettable evening with Michael Franzese, the original Goodfella, as he exclusively sits down with myself, Sean Attwood. With me as the host, there's going to be a no-holes-barred exploration of Michael Franzese's life, including his numerous arrests and jury trials that ultimately led to his pleading guilty to a federal racketeering charge, a 10-year prison sentence, and $15 million in restitution. You will have the unique opportunity to ask questions during an audience Q&A session, making this event a must-see for true crime enthusiasts and anyone curious about the underworld. Don't miss this explosive in-conversation with Michael Franzese. Live on stage in the UK. This exclusive in-person event will be held in various locations in the UK, Ireland and Scotland. Link in the description box below this video if you want to grab yourself a ticket. Back to the podcast. Cheers.